Committee will come to order. Welcome and thank you for joining today's hearing entitled An Examination of the Implications of Proposition 12. After brief opening remarks, members will receive testimony from our witnesses today, and then the hearing will be open to questions. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this important hearing to examine the implication of California's Proposition 12. To each of our witnesses, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your expertise with us. In 2018, California passed Proposition 12, a law that imposes arbitrary and unscientific housing standards on any pork, veal, or egg products that a producer may wish to sell into the state. Backed by animal rights activists, the requirements of Prop 12 have no standing in reality and do nothing to improve animal welfare, food safety, or food affordability. In fact, California's Department of Food and Agriculture noted in their rulemaking that animal confinement space allowances prescribed in the Act are not based in specific peer-reviewed published scientific literature or accepted as standards within the scientific community to reduce human foodborne illnesses, promote worker safety, the environment, or other human or safety concerns. Similarly, the American Veterinary Medical Association opposes Prop 12, stating the arbitrary housing requirements do not objectively improve animal welfare and may unintentionally cause harm. Such concerns, along with the compliance costs for producers and consumers alike, led Prop 12 all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. After years of litigation, the United States Supreme Court ultimately upheld California's law. Importantly, Justice Gorsuch noted several times in a majority opinion that Congress would be well within its power to act in this case. I disagree with the court's decision to uphold Prop 12, but I do agree that Congress can and must act to rectify the burdens of Prop 12 as imposed on interstate commerce. I'm submitting for the record a letter from the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, that outlines the economic impacts that we have seen since Prop 12 went into effect in January 1st, 2024. So without objection, that letter is entered into the record. The letter highlights many concerning economic realities that our producers and consumers are facing in a post-Prop 12 world. The average cost of retrofitting or rebuilding facilities to meet Prop 12 standards is estimated at $3,500 to $4,500 per sow. The same data shows that compliance costs disproportionately affect small and mid-sized producers who face tighter margins and have less access to capital. In fact, as of the first quarter of 2025, 12% of small pork operations have exited the market or shifted production away from breeding, citing regulatory uncertainty and high transition costs. On the consumer side, retail pork prices in California have increased by 18.7% year over year, compared to a 6.3% increase nationwide over the same period. A recent USDA consumer affordability study found that low-income households in California reduced pork purchases by 22%, indicating price increases are affecting food access and affordability for economically vulnerable populations. The data shows that both producers and consumers are facing significant cost increases due to Prop 12. It begs the question, if producers are paying more and consumers are paying more, who's winning? Thankfully, the complexity and unfairness of Prop 12 has been realized by both sides of the aisle. Former Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack testified before this committee about the harms of Prop 12, stating there would be, quote, chaos in the marketplace, end quote, without a fix. Our current Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, also thinks that we must act and offered her full support for our efforts. She stated, quote, California has the right to do what California wants to do, but the minute that crosses the border and starts to compromise in such a significant way our pork producers, we need to act, end quote. That's why I introduced Section 12007 in the Farm Food and National Security Act of 2024. This provision is a common-sense middle ground approach to protect consumers from arbitrary and unscientific mandates. It does not undo thousands of state-based agriculture laws, and it does not restrict a state's right to impose standards within their own borders. It simply clarifies that states cannot impose, as a condition for sale or consumption, a production standard on livestock unless that livestock is located within the state's borders. This means that Prop 12 will stand in California, but only for those producers within California's borders. Similar state mandates, like Question 3 in Massachusetts, will also stand, but again, only for the producers within their borders. Section 12007 enjoys the support of the National Pork Producers Council, the American Farm Bureau Federation, and over 900 more national, state, and local farm organizations, as well as the AVMA. Despite this support from agriculture community, false narratives about Sections 12007 continue to be told in D.C. and across the countryside. Driven by animal rights groups who are parading as farmers and ranchers, I've heard every accusation possible, from China somehow gaining access to our farmland to thousands of state laws being overturned. Neither of these carries any weight. While false, the China argument is a convenient straw man during a time of heightened scrutiny of China's investments in the United States. The truth is that protein conglomerates with foreign ownership have the resources to comply with state-by-state mandates, while small family farmers and ranchers do not. The cost of compliance for small producers could actually push them out of the market altogether, leading to further consolidation in the industry, and that would be a true gift to China. As we hear from our witnesses today, it is my hope that we all take to heart what they are saying, from producers on the ground to the economic and legal experts who have watched this unfold, to the consumer advocate who sees higher prices every day in California. It is paramount that we take their concerns seriously. In order to protect the right of American farmers and ranchers to raise their animals how they see fit, we must provide a fix for Proposition 12. Now, I'm proud of the work we did to get Section 12007, which passed out of committee last year with a bipartisan vote. I look forward to working with my colleagues to include this provision in the upcoming Farm Bill reauthorization. Thank you again to our witnesses for being here today. We look forward to hearing from you. And with that, I yield to the distinguished gentlelady from Minnesota, the ranking member of the Agriculture Committee, for any opening comments that she would like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I'm proud to say that Minnesota ranks second in the country for hog production, with over 3,000 pig farms operating in the state. As such, I am intensely familiar with the subject of today's hearing and have heard from producers on both sides of the issue. Like most controversial cases, it's not really that simple. Today's topic has been litigated extensively since I first came to Congress. Since California residents voted to enact Proposition 12 in 2018, we've seen challenges to the law, the Supreme Court ruling in favor of the law, numerous proposals and attempts to negate the law through federal legislation, and now a hearing regarding where we go from here. Prop 12 is clearly a contentious issue, and it merits thoughtful, bipartisan discussion. Even today, this very day, I've seen two different letters citing two different sets of data that come to different conclusions about pork prices in California. Any true representative of farm country knows that Prop 12 is a concern for producers on both sides of the issue. We can't ignore the questions and challenges Prop 12 raises. Even the Biden administration's Ag Secretary said we need to treat this issue seriously to ensure stability in the marketplace. I agree that we can't have 50 states with 50 different regulatory frameworks because of the significant challenges it would present to producers. But I also believe that there are ways to avoid that situation. I also recognize that many pork producers have made significant financial investments to make their operations Prop 12 compliant to satisfy the desires of California's consumers for premium pork products. It would be unfair to the family farmers who updated their facilities to comply with new rules to keep or gain market access to change the rules on them after they've already made those investments. I think Congress also needs to be mindful of the voters in California who exercise their rights under the state constitution to adopt this policy. We should think carefully before allowing legislators in Washington to override their will. While I welcome more attention to this topic, there are additional threats to the livestock sector happening right now that also deserve this committee's focus. This administration's worldwide trade war could hurt our domestic livestock industry. We export 30% of the pork we produce, and hogs are constantly moving back and forth across our border with Canada. But today, packers are being forced to render hogs that normally would have been exported. We haven't gained new market access to replace the lost Chinese market, which took a hit during the COVID-era supply chain chaos, and then shrank further after China canceled 12,000 metric tons of U.S. pork imports in retaliation against President Trump's first trade war. At the same time, there's ongoing labor shortage for hog farms and meat processors that's being exacerbated by the administration's chaotic and volatile mass deportation program. The administration is eliminating large portions of the meatpacking workforce, which will affect hog prices when packers can't operate facilities at full capacity. Just the other week, 200 legal workers at a JBS plant in Iowa had their visas revoked and are now being deported. Congress can work on solutions to revitalize and strengthen the agriculture guest worker program, but common sense needs to prevail. I'm hopeful that this Prop 12 hearing will give us some new ideas to work with and possibly yield a viable path forward for all of our nation's hog farmers. I'm also hopeful that the majority, during any Farm Bill discussions that might occur, will be open to new ideas. I want to thank our witnesses for their testimony today. I look forward to hearing from them. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so that the witnesses may begin their testimony to ensure that there's ample time for questions. Our first witness today is Mr. Patrick Horde, who is the CEO of Horde Family Farms, a fifth-generation family farming operation located in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and surrounding states. They raise approximately 8,500 acres of corn, soybeans, wheat, and hay, as well as care for 47,000 sows and pigs from birth to market. They also feed approximately 1,200 beef cattle per year, operate 3 grain elevators, employ 350 team members, and partner with over 200 farmer swine growers. Mr. Horde also serves as Vice President of the National Pork Producers Council Board of Directors. Our next witness is Mr. Matt Scheidemann, a pig farmer and board member with the Iowa Farm Bureau. And he lives and farms with his wife, Mindy, and their 7 children near Sioux Center in Sioux County, Iowa. Our third witness today is Ms. Holly Cook, who is an economist at the National Pork Producers Council. Ms. Cook collects and analyzes data for the pork industry and conducts research on the impact of proposed policies and regulations on the pork industry. She grew up on a farrow-to-finish farm operation in Winthrop, Iowa. Our next witness is Mr. Travis Cushman, the Deputy General Counsel for Litigation and Public Policy at the American Farm Bureau Federation. He has spent the better part of 4 years examining the negative effects of California's Proposition 12 and helped elevate the issue to the Supreme Court. Our fifth witness today is Ms. Lily Roca, the Executive Director of the Latino Restaurant Association, an 800-plus member national organization based in Los Angeles, California, and she is also the founder of Latino Food Industry Trade Show, the nation's largest Latin food trade show. I'll now yield to our ranking member, Ms. Craig, to introduce our next witness.
Thank you. Tiffany Dow Lashmet is a professor and extension specialist in agriculture law. She is located in the Department of Agricultural Economics at Texas A&M University. Tiffany grew up on a family farm and ranch in northeastern New Mexico, where her family raised sheep, cattle, alfalfa, wheat, and milo. Tiffany has a BS in agribusiness, farm, and ranch management from Oklahoma State University and a Juris Doctorate from the University of New Mexico School of Law.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all for joining us today. We're now going to proceed to your testimony. You'll each have 5 minutes. The timer in front of you will count down to 0, at which point your time has expired. Mr. Horde, please begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Craig, and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to testify. My name is Pat Horde, and I am a fourth-generation pork producer from Bucyrus, Ohio. Our farm's legacy stretches back to 1905, when my great-grandfather purchased a tract of land in north-central Ohio. My wife Janelle and I carry on that legacy by caring for our pigs from birth to market. We have been blessed to farm row crops and livestock across a number of states, and importantly for today's discussion, we produce pork compliant with California Prop 12. I serve as the Vice President of the National Pork Producers Council. We represent the interests of America's more than 60,000 pork producers. Our industry supports over 573,000 U.S. jobs and adds about $63 billion to the nation's GDP. Despite producing Prop 12 compliant pork, I am here to say that Prop 12 and an unmitigated regulatory patchwork threatens our farm. Prop 12 makes it a crime in California to sell uncooked whole pork meat from the offspring of sows that aren't raised according to the state's arbitrary housing standards. Meat packers and retailers will not stop selling to California's 40 million residents, which means producers across the country have needed to comply with California's mandate. Proponents of Prop 12 claim the measure was designed to improve animal welfare. However, welfare is a complex issue. Every style of housing, including group pens, which are functionally required by Prop 12, come with challenges. Last year, supporting the preemption of Prop 12, the American Veterinary Medical Association stated, "The arbitrary housing requirements in Prop 12 do not objectively improve animal welfare and may unintentionally cause harm." Larger farms tend to have access to sufficient capital to diversify and absorb Prop 12's cost burdens, but smaller farms find it difficult to obtain the capital and undertake the associated risks. Regardless of size, all farms have or will continue to experience productivity losses under Prop 12. You simply cannot house the same number of sows in the same size barn. Prop 12 compliant housing is inherently less efficient. The existential challenge of Prop 12 is a patchwork of differing regulations across the country. It creates uncertainty around what design we need to use for our new barns and even how I decide what to do when an existing barn needs remodeling. Whatever I do today could need to be changed when a new state decides they want a different housing standard. These are expensive changes, and some farmers may exit the business amid this uncertainty, which increases consolidation. NPPC fought to stop California from regulating farms outside of its borders, filing suit against Prop 12 and taking the case to the Supreme Court. The lawsuit raised important legal questions around federalism, the relationship between states, and the power of individual states to regulate out-of-state businesses. The court made it clear Congress can and should fix Prop 12. There is strong bipartisan opposition to Prop 12. The Biden administration argued against it before the Supreme Court, and the Trump administration recently filed suit against Prop 12 over its impacts on egg prices, arguing it unnecessarily increases the cost of food and food production by manipulating interstate commerce. Prop 12 isn't only a domestic problem. It applies to and greatly concerns our trading partners. The Canadian government, for example, is analyzing the effects of Prop 12 and considering the U.S. obligations under the USMCA and the WTO. To summarize, Prop 12's housing standards were developed without the input of hog farmers, veterinarians, or food safety experts. Prop 12 does not objectively improve animal welfare and leaves the industry vulnerable to the uncertainty of a 50-state patchwork. NPPC urges Congress to fix Prop 12. We ask that you support Chairman Thompson's efforts to rein in the state's attempt to regulate interstate commerce, restore the sovereignty of states to deal with their own businesses, and abide by our internal obligations. I'm happy to answer any of your questions today.
Mr. Horde, thank you so much for your testimony. Mr. Scheidemann, please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Craig, and House Ag Committee to allow me to testify on this important issue. Sioux County, where I live, is consistently one of the top pork-producing counties in the United States, and Iowa accounts for nearly 40% of all hog production in this country. I've been farming and raising pigs all my life. I was born and raised on a farrow-to-finish operation and continued to farrow pigs until 2018. I've witnessed firsthand the advancements and improvements in our industry that prioritizes responsible production and animal well-being. I have raised hogs in all types of environments, and my life experiences provide a unique perspective to understand the negative consequences of initiatives like California's Prop 12 for both farmers and consumers. I am confident that U.S. pork production is more sustainable and humane than ever before. Our responsible industry growth resulted from stakeholders coming together, from producers to veterinarians to animal health and behavioral experts. It's the result of our pursuit of continuous improvement and seeking ways to provide our pigs the best possible environment. New technologies like computer thermostats and devices that measure both the volume and air movement in a hog barn are resources we use to ensure the maximum comfort of our pigs. In northwest Iowa, our climate can be extreme. Modern climate-controlled barns allow pigs to live comfortably year-round with access to fresh water, controlled feed, and real-time monitoring to provide the best customized environment and care. The most important thing I've learned from a lifetime of raising pigs is that it's critical for producers to have full control over the environment in which their pigs are raised. Lacking control to tailor our farm to best serve the animals' needs is one of the biggest problems with Prop 12. When the rates at which barns may be stocked are determined arbitrarily, it creates economic hardship for the producer and can be detrimental to the pigs themselves. The decision of how many pigs to put in a barn at any given time in a production cycle should be left to the owners and managers of these farms who have the knowledge and experience. Prop 12 regulation centers around housing requirements of breeding stock. Management and husbandry of swine breeding stock is an area rife with misconceptions and misinformation. The intent behind giving sows more room to move around has good intention, but creates several challenges and unintended consequences. Our efforts have always revolved around three principles. 1, the comfort of the animal. 2, the productivity of the animal. And 3, the health and safety of the stockman. We've learned that confinement of breeding females has proven to be the best mix of those three principles. One thing that must be understood in the housing conversation is the ever-changing group dynamic of female breeding herds. Often, sows on the lowest rungs of the social hierarchy are pushed away from feed and water, and in many cases, they will be targeted and can be physically harmed by others in the group. Production systems have evolved with this reality in mind to provide the best animal care. That social hierarchy, That social hierarchy and behavior has real impacts for both animal welfare and farmer profitability. It can mean the difference between a female that produces 15 pigs in one litter versus a female that has only 5, or in many cases will end up aborting her entire litter altogether. The safety and survivability of piglets is a top priority. Proper housing of an expectant female significantly impacts her offspring and number of healthy piglets. From years of experience and lessons learned raising pigs, the pork industry found farrowing stalls to be the best method for both nursing sows and their baby pigs. The stalls help confine the mother while providing large, comfortable areas for the newborn baby pigs to lay down and rest. Confinement of the sow at this point is critical to the survival of her piglets. When making animal housing decisions, we must also consider the safety of the farmer and other herd caretakers. The sheer size of sows poses a risk to the stockman when undertaking everyday herd management activities. Breeding females also become more aggressive during the breeding and farrowing time periods, the times when the most direct management is needed. Regulation dictating how sows are housed and managed during these parts of the production cycle adds significant safety risks to the animals and caretakers. These housing decisions must stay on the farm with the people that know their animals best. Some consumers demand products that require premium pricing to compensate for less efficient production methods, while at the same time, many consumers have limited household budgets and are looking for affordable protein. When given flexibility in production, the pork industry can accommodate both. Spending my entire life raising pigs in a variety of ways, I'm convinced it's best to allow production methods and consumption demands to take shape in the open market as opposed to arbitrarily shaping them through poorly worded and short-sighted ballot initiatives. We need Congress to pass a fix to the Prop 12 issue, and we're asking you to protect Iowa farmers from overreach from initiatives that seek to harm animal agriculture and that increase the cost of animal protein to the consumer. Thank you to the committee for the time.
Mr. Kutterman, thank you so much for your testimony. Ms. Cook, please begin when you're ready.
Good morning. Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Craig, and members of the committee, Thank you for the invitation to testify today. My name is Holly Cook, and I'm an economist with the National Pork Producers Council, which represents 42 affiliated state pork associations and fights for reasonable public policy while protecting the livelihood of America's pork producers. I hold a master's degree in agricultural economics from Iowa State University, and while I'm a current resident of Washington, D.C., I grew up on a farrow-to-finish hog farm in northeast Iowa, where my family continues actively farming today. I'm here this morning to discuss the economic impacts of California's Proposition 12 and the implications that a conflicting state-by-state patchwork of regulations would have on the U.S. pork industry. Pork producers have faced many challenges in recent years, including a period of severe financial losses that by some measures was the worst in our industry's history. From late 2022 to early 2024, record high production costs and lower hog prices resulted in an average loss of $29 on each hog sold, equating to billions of dollars in lost equity across the industry. While margins have improved in 2025 and many farms are continuing to recover financially, there is no shortage of risk facing U.S. pork producers and their ability to make decisions and remain viable for future generations. The issues created by Prop 12 only add to the uncertainty, and despite recommending Congress fix Prop 12, the Supreme Court's decision has opened the door for any state to put stipulations on the sale of pork outside its borders. While California accounts for about 13% of domestic pork consumption, it is responsible for less than 0.1% of hog production, meaning it relies almost entirely on out-of-state farmers to supply compliant products. As expected, compliance with Prop 12 raises the cost of production at the farm level. While becoming compliant looks different for each individual farm, every approach comes with costs. For farms with group pen gestation systems, converting barns to be compliant may mean a 30 to 40% decline in production, a result of having fewer sows combined with reduced efficiencies. Farms may also face higher average costs for utilities, veterinary care, labor, and feed, and they'll have to spread their fixed costs out over fewer weaned pigs produced. Producers now also face decisions when replacing old barns and constructing new facilities. Because new Prop 12 compliant barns cost more per sow than other housing styles, producers would need to receive a premium of $5 to $8 on every pig sold for 15 years just to break even, and would need as much as $20 per pig to make them no worse off than investing in other housing systems. These estimates come from a study by economists at Iowa State University and the University of Minnesota. The current environment not only threatens the certainty and sufficiency of premiums, but it also increases the risk of future investment decisions. With higher costs at the farm level, combined with segmentation costs throughout the supply chain, it is no surprise that Prop 12 has also resulted in significantly higher prices for California consumers. A study by economists at the University of California, Davis estimated that after a transition period, Prop 12's long-run outcome would be 8% higher pork prices and a 6% decline in California's consumption of covered pork cuts, resulting in a $320 million hit to consumers each year. So far, Prop 12's impact has been even greater. A report by USDA economists showed that in the first 8 months of implementation, prices for covered products increased by 20% on average due to Prop 12, with pork loin seeing an even greater increase at 41%. It's been more than a year since that report was released, and updated scanner data shows that these trends continue to hold. Retail prices in California are still over 20% higher than before Prop 12 took effect, while the total sales volume is down by double digits. This means Californians are now spending more but consuming less pork. While Californians are seeing the impacts today, one study found that if the entire industry were required to adopt a system like Prop 12, it would reduce total U.S. consumer welfare by $41 billion over 15 years, disproportionately impacting price-sensitive, high pork-consuming households. It's also critical to recognize that compliance is more feasible for larger farms that can more easily offset costs and secure the needed capital. Widespread adoption of Prop 12-like measures would almost certainly hasten the closing of doors for small to medium-sized farms, or at the very least result in a greater percentage of U.S. sows being owned by fewer farms. In closing, NPPC urges Congress to fix the challenges created by Prop 12 and deliver much-needed certainty to U.S. pork producers. Thank you for the opportunity to share my expertise, and I welcome your questions.
Ms. Cook, thank you so much for your testimony. Mr. Cushman, please begin when you're ready.
Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Craig, and members of the committee. My name is Travis Cushman. I'm the Deputy General Counsel for Litigation and Public Policy at the American Farm Bureau Federation. I'm honored to provide this testimony today on behalf of Farm Bureau members across the nation. Along with the National Pork Producers Council, I spent the better part of 4 years litigating Farm Bureau's challenge to California Proposition 12. Our legal challenge was based on a constitutional doctrine called the Dormant Commerce Clause. The doctrine states that because Congress has the exclusive power to regulate interstate commerce, states do not. In short, states are prohibited from substantially burdening interstate commerce through their own laws and regulations. For those looking for a deeper dive on the issue, I encourage you to read the Biden administration's Supreme Court brief supporting our arguments. Farm Bureau's efforts resulted in a Supreme Court decision that is so convoluted, so confusing, and so contradictory that no one can articulate the state of the Dormant Commerce Clause today, or how courts should proceed with similar claims. As you know, you need 5 of the 9 justices to agree with you to win a case. 6 justices agreed with our legal theory, and 5 agreed that we'd established enough facts to win on that claim. An easy win, right? Not quite. Because of the way we count votes at the Supreme Court, our farmers lost. The resulting fractured 5-4 decision lacks a unifying rationale. The makeup of the 4 dissenting justices was also remarkable. This is the only case where Justice Jackson and Chief Justice Roberts have ever dissented together. In 2023, 25% of Chief Justice Roberts and half of Justice Kavanaugh's dissents were in our case. I want to emphasize, 6 justices from across the ideological spectrum agreed that the Constitution protects against states balkanizing the country's markets, and 5 agreed that we'd establish such a claim. In the aftermath of the case, judges have disagreed on how to interpret the ruling, and legal scholars have called the result a paradox and a mess, but a good deal more troubling than the ordinary mess. And that's what leaves us in the legal quagmire we are here to address today. One thing is clear from the case. The United States Congress is the branch of government with responsibility now to address the problem of states imposing their production laws on other states. Farmers today face a growing risk of being subject to overlapping or conflicting mandates from multiple states. While Prop 12 requires 24 square feet of space per sow, another state could shift the requirement, after investments have been made, to 25 square feet or 30 square feet, causing what Secretary Vilsack referred to in front of this committee in February 2024 as chaos in the marketplace, or as Secretary Rollins stated at a recent House Appropriations hearing, as not sustainable. This forces farmers into the impossible position of retrofitting their barns, which they may not be able to afford to do, and going against their own animal husbandry experience and advice of their veterinarians. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the American Farm Bureau Federation appreciates your leadership in addressing the turmoil created by Proposition 12 and the bipartisan Farm Bill that passed out of this committee last Congress. When a single state can condition access to its market on compliance with production mandates that override the judgment of veterinarians, farmers, and experts nationwide, Congress must act. This is not a theoretical concern. It is already harming farmers, confusing the courts, and threatening the viability of a national food system. The language that this committee passed in the 2024 Farm Bill restores clarity, reassserts congressional authority over interstate commerce, and protects both producers and consumers from a patchwork of conflicting mandates. And Farm Bureau looks forward to working with Congress to pass a Farm Bill soon that will address the interstate commerce issue. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Mr. Cushman, thank you so much for your testimony. Ms. Roca, please begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Craig and all the members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to testify before you today. My name is Lily Rocha. I am a lifelong Angelino and the Executive Director of the Latino Restaurant Association based in Los Angeles. The LRA represents thousands of small family-owned Latino restaurants who are the cornerstone of their communities, primarily in Southern California, but also nationally. The LRA is a member of the Food Equity Alliance, a California coalition fighting for accessible and affordable food for all. I'm also the president of the Latino Food Industry Association, a national association that serves grocers, distributors, food service providers, vendors, and other important businesses in Latino markets across the industry. We also host the Latino Food Industry Trade Show, Trade Expo, the largest convention for our industry, set for October 13th and 14th in beautiful Long Beach, California. You're all invited. Happy to host anyone who would like to come out. I'm here today to explain the harm Proposition 12 inflicts on minority-owned businesses and low-income families. Harm is what Prop 12 has caused, smashing like a wrecking ball the livelihoods of small restaurants and the communities we serve. By disrupting supply chains and driving up the cost of culturally vital foods like pork, It's brought economic devastation to families already stretched thin. This law's requirements, costly segregation, and certification processes are a death sentence for small businesses operating on razor-thin margins. The restaurants I represent serve working-class neighborhoods that can't absorb skyrocketing prices. In addition, Prop 12 is the most recent of many costly regulations that these small businesses, in particular restaurants, are being asked to absorb. Pork loins are up 41%, bacon 16%. A carnitas taco, once $1.50, now costs $5 to $6, pricing out loyal customers who rely on these meals not just for sustenance, but for cultural connection. Our restaurants face a brutal choice: raise prices and lose customers, shrink portions and sacrifice quality, or remove pork dishes entirely, erasing cultural traditions that define our identity. This is not a hypothetical. This is actually happening today. For our Latino restaurants, carnitas are not just a meal, they are part of our heritage. Latino communities are top consumers of pork in this country. Overregulation that takes food off the plate risks alienating communities and driving businesses toward closure. This isn't a menu change, it's a cultural loss. Some claim the market has adjusted to Prop 12, but that's a fantasy spun by those blind to the struggles of small businesses and working class families in California. National chains can leverage their resources and cost advantages to secure compliant pork. However, pork prices are still going up. My members, of which 65% own less than 10 locations, are small family-run restaurants and grocers that don't have that luxury. They can't negotiate bulk contracts or spread costs across nationwide operations. Worse, compliant pork is often impossible for them to source. The small independent distributors they rely on, unlike those serving big chains, can't secure steady supplies. Many small businesses are forced to buy pork at retail from the very chains they compete against, paying inflated prices and marking up prices just to survive. This vicious cycle erodes profits, threatens closures, and raises costs for struggling communities. In my opinion, Prop 12 wasn't the will of all consumers. It was bankrolled by those with an agenda who leveraged the convoluted ballot measure process where California voters could not have known all of the impacts. Former USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack and current Secretary Brooke Rollins have warned of supply chain chaos, and they are right. Sales are down and prices are up. Without intervention, this law will continue to dismantle the cultural and economic fabric of communities, leaving families without access to their heritage and businesses on the brink of collapse. Thank you for your attention to this critical issue. I'm very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Ms. Roca, thank you so much for your testimony. Mrs. Dow-Lashmet, please begin when you're ready.
Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Craig, and members of the committee, I'm honored to testify before you today on this important issue. My name is Tiffany Dowell-Lashmet. I'm a professor and extension specialist in agricultural law with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. I focus my work on legal issues impacting rural landowners and agricultural producers. As is true in my professional role, I am here today to offer an objective, unbiased view of the law as it surrounds this issue. I am not here to offer my opinion as to the wisdom of Proposition 12, the Supreme Court opinion in National Pork Producers versus Ross, or any proposed legislative enactments related to Proposition 12. I believe it is important to understand that there are, as is true with many issues, agricultural interests on all sides of the Proposition 12 debate. Certainly there are agricultural producers, groups, and businesses in favor of congressional action to overturn Prop 12. Similarly, there are agricultural producers, groups, and businesses strongly against Congress taking such action, many of whom have already gone to the expense to comply after Prop 12 was passed and upheld by the United States Supreme Court. I've spent my career explaining complex and often contentious legal issues to farmers and ranchers in an unbiased, neutral manner, and I trust that that experience will aid me in doing the same here today. The United States Constitution grants Congress the right to regulate commerce between the states. There's little doubt that should Congress wish to do so, it could pass a nationwide law related to the sale of products under specific living conditions. The United States Supreme Court recently noted as much in its consideration of Proposition 12. States have traditionally handled animal welfare issues, including the passage of laws related to production within their jurisdiction. California took these laws a step further
by passing AB 1437 and Proposition 12, applying California confinement standards to in-state producers and containing a sales ban provision prohibiting products not complying with these standards from being sold in California, regardless of the state or country where animals were raised. Opponents turned to the courts, filing lawsuits against this sales ban provision of Prop 12, relying principally on an alleged violation of the Dormant Commerce Clause. The Dormant Commerce Clause theory posits that the Commerce Clause not only vests Congress with the power to regulate trade and commerce between the states, but also contains a negative command, prohibiting the enforcement of certain state laws even when Congress has failed to legislate in an area. In the challenge to Proposition 12 in National Pork Producers Council versus Ross, the lower courts dismissed the Dormant Commerce Clause claim, and the United States Supreme Court affirmed that dismissal. Justice Gorsuch wrote the opinion for the court. While certain portions of the court's analysis were unanimous, others were fractured and complicated to parse. When struggling to explain this complex ruling to producers, I have frequently reminded myself not even all 9 Supreme Court justices could get on the same page about how to properly legally analyze Proposition 12. In summary, the court upheld Prop 12 against the Dormant Commerce Clause challenge. Given the nature of the opinion, however, the broader takeaway and likely application to future cases is far more difficult to analyze and predict. There have been other relevant cases challenging Prop 12 and the similar Massachusetts law Question 3, both based on Dormant Commerce Clause and other legal grounds outlined in my written testimony that may offer additional guidance. Finally, there have been a number of proposed bills here in Congress that would essentially invalidate laws like Proposition 12. These proposals vary greatly in scope, breadth, and potential implications. There is no doubt that this issue is important to agricultural producers across the country. Livestock producers, in particular, find themselves on both sides of the debate. Congress has the authority pursuant to the Commerce Clause to act in this area. Whether to do so or how to undertake such an effort is a matter of considerable complexity. In the absence of congressional action or unexpected movement in the judiciary, state laws such as Prop 12 will likely continue to remain in effect, and other states will remain free to pass additional laws relating to products that are offered for sale in their state, no matter where they are produced. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Mrs. Dow-Lashmet, thank you so much for your testimony. At this time, members will be recognized for questions in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority members, and in order of arrival for those who joined us after the hearing convened. You'll be recognized for 5 minutes each in order to allow us to get to as many questions as possible, and I recognize myself for five minutes. Ms. Cook, your testimony briefly mentions the potential consequences of a patchwork of conflicting production standards across the country. Can you tell us, as an economist, what you would expect to happen to pork producers and the pork industry as a whole if numerous states began developing different production standards?
Thank you for the question. Pork producers today are already subject to a significant amount of risk when it comes to the production and marketing of their animals. In a situation like you described, we would likely be seeing a much greater percentage of producers required to undertake costly investments and changes. And so that can have an impact at the farm level, but as far as our industry, it could impact our structure as well and may be a factor in fewer farms being able to own sows.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cushman, some people in this town have decided to run with a narrative that the Supreme Court has already ruled on this case, and therefore there's nothing left to be, that needs to be done. Can you walk us through what the Supreme Court ruling actually said, and especially Justice Gorsuch's commentary on the role Congress can play here?
Thank you so much, Chairman Thompson. Yes, the narrative that the Supreme Court has already ruled and the issue is settled is not entirely true. What essentially Justice Gorsuch said is the judiciary is punting the issue to Congress, which he felt was the most appropriate branch of government to handle the issue. Justice Gorsuch believed, and along with Justice Thomas and Justice Barrett, that the judiciary was not the appropriate branch to handle these kinds of claims. They felt that the Dormant Commerce Clause did not go as far as we believed it did in substantially burdening interstate commerce. As you know, you need 5 justices to win a case. we had 4 justices that fully agreed with us on the law and the facts. 2 justices in the majority, Justices Kagan and Sotomayor, believed that we had not proved the factual predicate to establish this claim. They agreed with us in the law, but not in the facts. Justice Barrett wrote separately to say that she did not agree with us in the law, but targeting Justices Sotomayor and Kagan said that we clearly did establish the factual predicate to establish that kind of a claim if they believed such a claim did exist. But in short, Justice Gorsuch, writing for the majority of the fractured opinion, did say that the Dormant Commerce Clause, as we saw it, does not provide us relief, that if we did view this as a concern, Congress would be the appropriate body to handle this issue.
Thank you so much. Mr. Hort, your testimony notes that you've been a full-time pork producer since 1987, so you know the uncertainties farmers face with volatile markets, weather conditions, and regulatory burdens. Given the Supreme Court ruling, do you worry that similar state mandates will keep popping up across the country? Even though you've complied partially with Prop 12, will you be able to survive if the goalposts keep moving?
Thank you, Chairman Thompson. Yes, this isn't a concern for our farm. In Ohio, we have already experienced the goalposts being moved. In 2010, our producers in Ohio agreed to a group housing plan for the sows under the Ohio Care Standards Board. In 2024, we made the decision to modify a barn that was previously converted to the Ohio standard. The potential of a patchwork of another 49 states is causing me to make additional changes is a major concern for our family's operation.
Thank you, Mr. Hort. I yield back the balance of my time, and I recognize the ranking member from Minnesota for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Ms. Lashmet, I saw the letter this morning from USDA to my colleagues on Prop 12 raising prices in California for pork. Talk to me a little bit about beyond consumer prices. I know there are a number of other issues that this body must consider. Various legislative proposals would preempt Prop 12. How could those different proposals impact other state laws? I'm just trying to get a sense of if we preempt Prop 12, you know, what happens in other states to their laws.
Sure. Well, in typical lawyer fashion, I think I'm going to tell you that it depends specifically on the language of the proposal that Congress passed and the specific state laws at issue. So if we look particularly at the language that was included in the Farm Bill, that language was much narrower than the language that was proposed in the EATS Act, for example. And so I think it really depends on the specific language of the congressional action, the breadth of the definitions included in those actions, and once we figure out that language, you can see the number of state laws that could potentially be impacted. I have seen a study from Harvard looking specifically at the EATS Act, and the estimates there were that it could preempt a number of existing state laws.
I know in my own state of Minnesota, I think it was somewhere around 40 state laws that could be impacted, the language in the EATS Act. Ms. Lashmet, there are producers obviously on both sides of this issue. In your estimation, how many producers have converted their operations to become compliant? And if Congress were to preempt Prop 12, what would happen to the producers who have already invested to become Prop 12 compliant?
Admittedly, I don't have individual knowledge of the number of producers that have complied with Prop 12. I did see the letter from USDA this morning, and that indicated that USDA believes it's about 27% of producers have made those changes. The impact on them if Proposition 12 were to be preempted by federal law, is that they've got the sunk cost of having already invested in making those expensive and complicated changes to their operations. And if the law changes at that point, they likely would feel that they had done that with no need, right? An unnecessary investment in those changes.
Thank you. I wonder if I could hear from the rest of the panel on that question. What happens to producers that have already invested to become Prop 12 compliant if we preempt it? Ms. Roca? Is there any concern with that?
From a consumer perspective, our concern would be in the pricing, of course. So that would be something that, you know, we're looking at increasing prices for not just the consumer, but also for restaurant owners who actually purchase the product. That's
Mr. Cushman?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This kind of a law would not require those farmers that have changed operations to change back. They're not making it illegal for them to continue farming that way and serving whatever markets do want to purchase those products, and really provide farmers a choice on how they would proceed going forward. And importantly, it protect those farmers that have made the change from any future changes that another state might have by enacting another law that's contradictory to Prop 12 or further moving the goalposts further than what Prop 12 did. And finally, to protect the current farmers that are not compliant with Prop 12 to be able to serve markets across the country.
Ms. Cook?
Thank you. I would begin by saying producers who are currently compliant will be the best positioned to continue serving markets, excuse me, where there's a demonstrated demand for those products. But additionally, producers compliant and not compliant have a shared concern about a patchwork and the future risk to investments in the pork industry.
Mr. Schulman?
Thanks for the question. I would agree with what Holly said in terms of the market demand, and I would defer over to Patrick with his experience in the conversion of their operation.
Mr. Hort?
Yeah, thank you, Congresswoman. As I thought about it, you know, I appreciate. Hopefully, you can appreciate the challenge I'm in because I have made some conversions. But the fact of the matter is me sitting here saying the patchwork is a big concern for me personally as well as our industry of the continued potential of 49 additional states making mandates, and it's become, as my experience, and I mentioned in my question earlier, it's a challenge for us, and we would, so that's why we're looking at the opportunity to, discontinue the patchwork is what a big challenge for us.
Thank you, Mr. Hort. Thank you to the panel, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Craig. And I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Hord, the people who support Proposition 12 have started the narrative that any fix to this mess that's been created by it would help China somehow. Your testimony, touches on this. Do you believe that a fix to Proposition 12 would help China, or do you believe that it will help Americans, farmers, and ranchers and consumers?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think this is a U.S. pork industry concern, from the smallest producer to the larger ones, and so no, I do not think this is in any ways helps our foreign. In fact, our foreign trading partners are concerned about this, and I think at times could be looked at as an advantage for other countries. So but yeah, that's kind of how, as National Pork Producers Council, what we think about that.
Thank you, Mr. Hord. Mr. Cushman, I'm going to come to you, but I want to read this section of Section 12,007 of the Farm Bill. That in general, producers of covered livestock have a federal right to raise and market their covered livestock in interstate commerce, and therefore no state or subdivision thereof may enact or enforce directly or indirectly a condition or standard on the production of covered livestock other than for covered livestock physically raised in such state or subdivision. Now, we concede that they have the right to do that they have the right to put those stipulations on producers in their state. But from the legal side of things, do you have any concern that section of the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2024 will somehow give China unfettered access to our agricultural markets?
I have no concerns with that. I see it primarily as benefiting small and mid-sized farmers across the country who otherwise would not be able to afford mandates from other states.
I mean, Mr. Cook, can you explain generally how much production costs increase when a producer has to, Ms. Cook, can you explain generally how much production costs increase when a producer converts their operation to comply with Proposition 12? Are these cost impacts along the rest of the supply chain to processors and retailers, for example? And if so, what are they?
Thank you for the question. As with anything, the exact cost number will vary depending on the individual farm and their situation, but looking at the cost of constructing compliant facilities, that can increase fixed costs anywhere from 20 to 40% per pig, but we're also seeing higher operating costs, things like labor, feed, veterinary care, utilities. Those can increase 15% when converting to Proposition 12, and then we also may have to spread those out over fewer pigs due to the productivity impacts of Prop 12. So that's on the farm level side, and there are certainly costs across the supply chain, packing, processing, distribution, and retail, all of the segregation and tracing and things like that. I don't have specific data on that topic, but those are certainly significant and should be considered as well.
Ultimately, any business has to have more dollars in than they have going out. And when the government passes rules and regulations that increase the cost of operations, whether it be in the construction of facilities as it is here for swine, I mean, if the farmer can't get their money back somehow, then the farmer goes broke. I mean, and I think that's the problem when you have people who either don't understand business or don't support agriculture or America's ability to feed itself, continue to imply these additional burdens on the producers. Ultimately, the consumer has to pay, or the producer goes out of business. I think, Ms. Rocha, this was effectively your comments, correct? I mean, if you increase the price of pork to the restaurant chain, if the consumer can't afford to pay for the product, then the product's no longer available. Your restaurant goes out of business, is that correct?
Yes, that's my point exactly, and that is we're seeing that already just based on other regulations, so this would be yet another regulation on top of those that would affect the restaurants.
And you somewhat alluded to this. Are you a resident of California?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a resident of California. Yes.
And so California has public initiative, a lot of things go on the ballot, but do you think that the general public who voted on this understood what the end result was of this ballot measure when they voted to put it in place?
I believe that the law, as well-intentioned as it was, I feel that the voters could not have known the impacts, and we see that a lot with our similar regulations. So, like I said, I don't think that the voters could have known the impacts of Prop 12.
My time has expired. I now recognize, thank you all for your testimony and answering the questions. I now recognize Chairman David Scott from the great state of Georgia.
Thank you, Chairman. We have before us one of the most challenging issues that this committee is faced with. We've got to guarantee that the livestock is raised safely and humanely on one hand, and at the same time ensure that farmers and ranchers can be successful in operating their businesses. But there's something a little deeper here. We have a substantial burden on our interstate commerce and the implications that this may have on the producers. So, Ms. Lement, your testimony was very effective because you placed a great deal of emphasis on expanding what some of our justices did not believe Proposition 12 placed a substantial burden. I want you to get into this a little bit because we have to be clear. Going into this, we got the producers on one hand, we got our farmers and ranchers on the other hand. We got to come together. We got to solve this problem. But in the middle of it is the Supreme Court. Help us find a way out of this challenge.
So I do think it's interesting that there was such a fractured opinion that came from the Supreme Court, and they struggled with the exact question that you're asking here. And if you look at the opinion, one of the big issues is whether or not there was a substantial burden on interstate commerce due to the language of Proposition 12 being enacted in California. I think one important note, it's kind of technical, but I do think it matters, is that the Supreme Court was reviewing a decision on a motion to dismiss, which is a 12b6 motion. What that means is there was no discovery conducted in the case, and so they were really relying completely on just the pleadings in the case for the facts. And so
I do think it's questionable if there was an additional factual record that had been developed through discovery, if that could have added more to the analysis of the substantial burden. With what the court had, what they decided was 5 justices actually did say that there was a substantial burden adequately alleged. 4 justices said that there were not. And then, as Mr. Cushman explained, given that Justice Barrett did not believe in weighing the burdens, that the outcome of the case was different than that 5-4 ruling on substantial burden.
Now, specifically, to what extent do increased producers' costs constitute a substantial burden, as the court mentioned?
The court did look at the increased cost on producers and the increased cost on consumers when they were weighing the potential substantial burden analysis in the case. So I think the court would say that it does have a factor in that analysis.
Now, are there other considerations similarly weighed when arriving at this decision?
So when the court looks at substantial burden, it looks at a wide variety of considerations, and those do include the increased cost on the producer, the increased cost on the consumer, the costs that may be spread out amongst the industry as a whole, right? It's not just the producer and the consumer that face the cost. All along the supply chain, there are increased difficulties and increased costs when you add additional regulations like Prop 12. The court took all of that into consideration.
Now, finally, how do courts compare the local interest in a law and the impact on interstate commerce? Is there a subjective nature to this decision which can lead to varying views between different courts?
Absolutely. There's absolutely a subjective nature. It's called the Pike balancing test, is where the court weighs those two interests. It is a subjective test. And here, that's the point that 3 of the justices made, was that the court really is not well able to conduct that type of subjective analysis where they're having to weigh California's interest in food safety and animal welfare against economic interests that were raised by the plaintiffs in the case.
Well, thank you for your excellent analysis of the courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. The chair now recognizes Mr. Bacon for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate y'all being here today. I tend to agree with the Supreme Court decision. It's not their role to regulate interstate commerce, but it is our role. And it seems to me that we can't have 50 state standards when it comes to pork or anything else like this. It's not fair to the producers, it's not fair to the processors and the consumers. My first question is to Mr. Hord and Mrs. Cook. I appreciate all the cost analysis that you've been given, but if we could put it down to the most basic level, if you go to the supermarket, how much more in percentage-wise will a consumer pay because of this rule? What will be the increase to the cost of pork?
On average, across covered products, it's 20%.
A 20% increase for consumers. And I think, we come from all different parts of the country, but for a low-income earner, a 20% increase in pork is terrible. And that's what we're doing here. And it doesn't just stop with California. Other states could be doing similar things. We've heard of others. So I think it is in our role here to get our arms around this and set a one standard for the country. Mr. Shootman, how hard is it to comply as you raise hogs? What would you have to do to comply with this on your farm?
I think that's going to vary based on the facility. We've got several different spaces and types of facilities, and the costs have been quoted $3,500 to $4,500 per sow. I think that could be on the low end depending on the type of facility you have, if you have to move concrete, if it's simply just replacing inside infrastructure. So it's going to vary, but it's going to be a cost, and the question on our side is, will we recoup the cost? And with the uncertainty of the potential patchwork, without that solid, if every state's going to rule, we just don't know where to go with it.
Would it cost you more than $50,000 to modify your operation to comply?
Pretty easily more, yes.
So maybe $100,000. I mean, that's an incredible cost to each individual farmer. I know it varies based on the size, but I just think we have to realize this is what we're asking individual farmers to do to comply with this. Mr. Cushman, are we at risk of having 50 state standards that people have to comply with?
Yes, we are, and that was one of the biggest concerns American Farm Bureau had about this law, and one of the reasons we decided to sue California on it. Currently, we run the risk of states constantly moving the goalposts on what farmers need to do. So after they make those investments, they have it changed again. The risk of states enacting a patchwork of legislation like that is in kind of mucking up the system. That is that threat of creating those kind of COVID-like disruptions we saw to the food supply system, and we are very, very concerned about that.
And the courts, if I understood it, the Supreme Court said it's not its role to force a standard, it is our role. Is that right?
It was a very difficult decision to understand and read. That is, in essence, what the court said was that 3 justices believed that it was not the judiciary's role to weigh in. 2 justices did not think we had established that burden to do so. So the way the makeup worked, we had 6 that would have taken the case, 5 that agreed with our factual predicates. But the ruling we have left over is essentially, yes, that is now the ball is in Congress's court to fix the problem.
As a lawyer, that's our constitutional role, is to regulate interstate commerce.
That's correct.
Mr. Hord, I wanted to clarify something that you brought up. You said that this rule, for this California proposition, in reality really helps the big farmer, but the small farmer is hurt the most. Is that, do I get that right?
No, I didn't say that. I just said that a lot of times larger farmers have the opportunity to have the capital and the ability to take the risk on a percentage of their production, where a smaller producer may not have that same access to capital and the ability to take the risk that comes because of the uncertainty of what we're discussing here today.
Okay, thank you for your clarification. I'll just close and just repeat the beginning question. A 20% increase in pork, that is a tremendous cost on the consumer at all levels of income. So thank you. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. Chair now recognizes Mr. McGovern for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to begin as I began yesterday with my questioning and say that this committee should be holding hearings on the impacts that the big ugly bill, which is now law, are going to have on nutrition programs. I mean, we should be having before us right now experts, heads of food pantries and food banks. We ought to have people with lived experience who rely on these nutrition programs about what will happen when the big ugly bill forces millions of people off of SNAP. 42 million people are going to see their benefits cut. We're told that 5 million people, older adults, veterans, families with teenagers, former foster youth are at serious risk of losing their benefits outright. What Republicans did in this committee on reconciliation, I believe, is unconscionable, all to fund and offset the cost of tax cuts for multimillionaires and billionaires. And it should be the focus of this committee to end hunger in this country and not make it worse. And by the way, ending hunger is good for the American farmers, too. They produce the food that is purchased with SNAP, and that's where our focus should be. Now, brings me to today's hearing. I'm astounded that we're taking what little time we have before the August recess to once again have Republicans use Prop 12 as a punching bag to distract from corporate consolidation in the meat sector. We have gone around in circles over Prop 12 and other states' anti-animal cruelty laws for years. And the largest pork producers are not happy. That 66% of all Americans oppose confinement crates. That's from a Harris poll, by the way. They went all the way to the Supreme Court a few years ago with an unconstitutional argument that undermined the most basic concepts of federalism. They lost, and now instead of moving on, and so many family farmers, as so many family farmers have done, by the way, they have come to Republicans for a legislative bailout. But this hearing will not get them closer to overturning Proposition 12. And that's because this hearing is an intentional misrepresentation of reality. The reality is that Prop 12 took effect at the beginning of last year, and the fear-mongering has fallen flat. Farmers in Iowa have not been forced to go crate-free if they don't want to. Grocery shelves are not empty. The egg industry actively supports Prop 12's cage-free requirements. Major retailers and restaurants support Prop 12. And many pig farmers, especially the 82% of pig farmers who have fewer than 500 pigs, are now benefiting from the new market opportunities for humanely raised meat. Now, a lot of good has come from these state laws, and Republicans still want everyone to believe that state laws to make sure pigs have enough room to turn around, as most Americans want, are some sort of Marxist plot against the heartland. And this leads me to the greatest misrepresentation of all today. There are thousands of farmers who vocally support Proposition 12, but Republicans have not given them an opportunity to speak today. With all due respect to this panel, and I appreciate Ms. Lashmet's neutrality, this is not a balanced panel. One would think there's not another side to this argument. But some of these farmers who support Proposition 12 are here. I've met them. They're in the audience, and they deserve a voice in this conversation because their livelihoods are at stake. And I ask unanimous consent to insert over 150 letters, Mr. Chairman, that I received from many of these farmers who support Proposition 12. I ask unanimous consent to put them on the record. These farmers have been shut out of this process, and let the record reflect that. Republicans love to talk about regulatory certainty, which I've figured out is euphemism for taking away anything they don't like. What about the certainty for these farmers who have made investments to go crate-free, who have followed the rules, and now you want to pull the rug from under them? Let me make this as clear as possible. If you kill Prop 12, you are putting independent family farms at risk. They will not be able to shoulder the cost of going backwards the way the factory farms can. It will be get big or get out all over again. And it will be crystal clear who cheered on the corporate operators while they ate up the last of the family farms in America. And one final thing, when Republicans were fighting with each other over the big ugly bill, one of the most contentious issues was a provision to block states from having their own regulations on AI. It almost tanked the bill. Folks do not like it when people in Washington try to override local decisions. And the divides among Republicans on Proposition 12 are not going to go away. I have news for my Republican friends. Washington doesn't always know what is best. Respect what our states are doing, and with that, I yield back my time.
Mr. McGovern, you made a motion to submit something for the record. All right, we're going to accept that without objection. I also have a letter from the American Farm Bureau that I would like to submit for the record. National Pork Producers Council include this and over 900 additional federal, state, and local farm organizations who write in strong support of Section 12,007 of the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2024. And I'm submitting for the record a letter from the American Veterinary Association who writes in strong support of Section 12,007 of the Farm, Food, and National Security Act of 2024. Submitting that for the record where they oppose Proposition 12 for animal welfare.
Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure all 150 of my letters are going to be in the record, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to submit it. With that, Mr. Johnson.
Ms. Cook, we've talked a fair amount today about how Proposition 12 has been a major driver of increased costs. I think 20 or 22% has been quoted today in California. I think you talked a little bit about how it can be $3,000 an animal to make these physical changes to the operations. Is that about right?
It can vary. It can be up to $4,500 or more for new construction.
And so California could change the rules again in a couple of years, right?
Yes.
Imposing a new round of capital investments for producers.
We face that risk today in this environment, yes.
And then you'd have what in economic terms I believe is just called a stranded cost. You get these pancaking requirements of physical improvements with really no mechanism to recover those costs in the marketplace. Is my understanding of that right?
In theory, a producer would not undertake these investments willingly without a guarantee of a return, but in our current environment, there is no certainty.
That uncertainty has a chilling effect on investment and new market entrants. My understanding of that's right?
Yes.
Which over time is going to further inflate food prices for Americans that frankly deserve to have affordable protein. Is that right?
If the impacts have the effect of contraction and that pressure on the industry, then certainly could increase pork prices.
So I want to shift a little bit about to animal welfare, either Mr. Hort or Mr. Skytman. There have been some studies quoted today, Mr. Skytman, maybe I would start with you, that there has not been an increase in animal welfare post Proposition 12. Is my understanding of that right?
That is correct.
And in fact, sow mortality went up. The need for additional antibiotics went up. Is that right?
That's correct.
So what are the proponents of Prop 12 missing? What do they not understand about sow behavior? What do they not understand about animal husbandry that causes them to misfire so dramatically on their views of what these animals really need to be safe and sound?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I think within that lies the point that in terms of welfare, we are where we are today in our production systems because we're trying to find the best welfare for the sow. And sometimes that leads us to more confinement, but truly, as we've studied things over the years, it's the best outcome for the sow, for her offspring, all the way down the line. It's a constant moving target, but that's how we got to where we are today. It was because of animal welfare.
So every producer I've ever met cares about animal welfare. They understand that that is a living creature worthy of decent treatment. But let's assume that wasn't the case. Let's assume that it was just about dollars and cents. Do animals under duress thrive? Do animals under duress put on weight?
I think that's a great question, and I think the interesting thing about a female sow herd is that if there's poor welfare, your pocketbook will suffer because poor welfare will lead to decreased production every time. And it's almost an instant feedback when you're managing a breeding herd poorly to what you're going to get out at the end. So I think that's a great question. Thank you.
So again, Tier 1, decent humans care about animal welfare, but Tier 2, successful businessmen and successful businesswomen care about animal welfare because an animal that is comfortable will produce better economic results. Am I right?
Absolutely.
But what else can you tell us about that? Give us a sense of how dramatically true that is in the marketplace.
I think one thing we discussed here recently was just how, again, in the production systems that we developed, whether it be the breeding herd or whether it be the production herd, our goal is to give every pig the same opportunity to thrive. And really, if we're doing that, then our bottom line is in great shape too. And so the big piece of that is the welfare, the environment, the day-to-day management. And like I said in my testimony, if we're going to have to try to fit or try to meet an arbitrary target set by people who are away from the farm, and we don't have, and some of that control is taken away from us, invariably our ability to do the best for that animal at any one given time could suffer.
Proposition 12 has, according to the studies we've discussed today, increased cost to consumers. It has reduced the viability of small family operations, and it has injured animal welfare. Proposition 12 is a fantastic failure, and it is time for Congress to fix that mistake. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would yield back.
Chair now recognizes Ms. Adams of North Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like, first of all, to ask for unanimous consent to submit into the record written testimony from ASPCA opposing overturning Proposition 12 and other state laws. Mr. Howard, I have a question, a few yes or no's for you. Are you aware that there are pork producers who are benefiting from the market created by Proposition 12?
Was that question to me? Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Howard. Yeah, yes or no, sir?
So was that question to me?
Are you aware that there are pork producers who are benefiting from the market created by Proposition 12?
There are definitely producers that are raising Prop 12 compliant pork. Yes.
Okay. And so Congressman McGovern is introducing letters from hundreds of these farmers that it would be helpful if you get to know them because they may be your members. I think he's already spoken to that. So why is NPPC working against these farmers?
Thank you. Is this a question for me too as well?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Well, the challenge is we have a state that raises 0.1% of the pork in the U.S. And so when they make a mandate, it forces essentially mandates to the rest of the country that there has to be conversions to this mandate. And so I think MPPC's position is the concern that it's forcing other states to be able to meet the demand of one state that of another state, and I think that's the crux of the concern here, ma'am. Thank you.
So let me ask you, does NPPC receive any government pork commodity checkoff funds, to your knowledge?
Yes, yes. MPPC is a voluntary checkoff organization.
Okay. What percentage of your funds consists of commodity pork checkoff funds? Do you know what the percentages?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
What percentage of your budget consists of commodity pork checkoff funds?
Well, I could not answer what the exact percentage is being used. I mean, everything for us, MPPC is a public policy.
Okay, well, you don't have a percentage that you know of. Okay, well, let me move on. I've heard from producers and companies, both large and small, that have invested in Proposition 12 complaint systems, not because they agree with or support Proposition 12, but because the law was passed in 2018, and they had a business decision to make. They decided to invest in a compliance system to supply a large market, and some of those producers have invested tens of millions of dollars. They've faced nearly 5 years of uncertainty from the initial January 2022 implementation date. And when the Supreme Court ruled in 2023, they hoped that this was finally a settled matter. Now Congress is introducing even more uncertainty. Those producers who invested are the ones who will be hurt. Ms. Lashmet, have you seen any data that assesses the cost that these producers will incur to revert back to the traditional system?
No, ma'am, I've not seen specific data on that. I certainly have heard producers discuss that is a concern for them, but I don't have specific numbers on that.
Okay. In your opinion, will the EATS Act as written or any preemption of Proposition 12 be subject to additional legal challenge and additional years of uncertainty for these producers who are simply trying to follow the law to have access to a market?
I think it's safe to say if Congress acts in this space, it's very likely that it will be challenged in the courts.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thank you all for your testimony. And, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. And I am submitting for the record a letter from the Livestock Marketing Association where they offer support for Section 12,007. Without objection, Mr. Mann, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate the chairman for having this hearing. I represent the Big First District of Kansas, 60 primarily rural counties in western and central Kansas. The Big First is one of the top swine producing districts in the country, much smaller than Iowa and other states, but we generate more than $640 million in sales, ranked 4th nationally. We have over 1,000 farms raising hogs and pigs each year. Kansas farmers, ranchers, and ag producers have been burdened with additional costs to conform with not Kansas law or even federal law, where they have a seat at the table, but from a state that's 718 miles from my district's border, with their fraction of the production compared to what we produce in Kansas. Fellow Kansan President Dwight Eisenhower once said that farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from a cornfield. And that's exactly what's happened in California with Proposition 12. I look forward to hearing from you all on your perspectives on the issue and how it's affecting our ag producers. Just a few questions, maybe first for you, Mr. Hord. How does Prop 12 affect U.S. pork producers' ability to access export markets, particularly given that most foreign buyers expect a uniform national standard?
Thank you for that question. To my knowledge, and I'm obviously a pork farmer, but to my knowledge, I don't know that the export out of the U.S. Typically, we're trying to meet that California standard. Now, the concern is for other foreign of our foreign trading partners. They're concerned about the fact that they would have to comply to be able to sell pork or bring pork in to California, which does give some concerns with the USMCA as well as the WTO concerns. So that is a concern of MPPC.
In your mind, do inconsistent state requirements like Prop 12 make it harder for us to compete globally?
It does. It does make it a challenge. The fact of the matter is, though, that mostly Prop 12 is being supplied from the U.S. market, and so I don't immediately think it's a global trade issue. Although MPPC supports global trade and is advocating on that on behalf of pork producers.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Do you find that there's any evidence of significant premiums at the store for Prop 12 compliant pork products, such that they would outweigh the increase in production costs that you've seen per producer? In other words, what is the market saying as far as the demand for products that are Prop 12 compliant, California or otherwise?
Well, in California, it's the only option for covered products. So they're paying a lot more than they were before Prop 12, and they're also paying more than other U.S. consumers in other states for the same product. So we've seen that in the data. And as, in terms of, I think you asked about the cost and the producers, there is more than just even the farm level cost that goes into what the consumer has to pay. There's costs incurred at every level of the supply chain. And so what we're seeing is much higher prices, and with that, consumers able to consume less pork.
Are you seeing other states provide a premium or market, pork that is Prop 12 compliant, or what are other states doing outside of California?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that there's a difference between demand from consumers for certain products that's communicated through market signals and a willingness to pay, and then a voter-approved measure that requires that pork be sold. So we're seeing that in California. There are other markets for certain products that are, occurring based on consumer demand, but not in the same restrictive and requirement way that we see with Proposition 12.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. With that, I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Costa because Ms. Brown is allowing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ms.
You
Brown.
should thank Ms. Brown, not the chair.
That's what I was going to do.
I got you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank Ms. Brown for the courtesy of allowing me to go before her. Obviously, this is a hearing that impacts California, and I would hope to believe, as a third-generation farmer from California, that this isn't a morning to simply beat up on California. And I, with all due respect, am not feeling that the panel that we have here, as good as it is balanced in terms of the different points of view that clearly are involved with a lot of other elements of agriculture and farmers that have adjusted and are taking advantage of the opportunities that Proposition 12 provides. The hearing today, I think, is obviously focused on the grievances on Prop 12, and let me be clear, I did not endorse Prop 12. It was a measure approved by the people of the state of California in 2018. It has created a niche marketplace for producers, but we also need to know that it wasn't fully implemented until July 1st, 2023, because of the litigation that took place. And in terms of the impacts on the market, while some studies have been cited, I don't think anyone cited the Oklahoma State University professor of economics, who indicated from an economic analysis I reviewed, there is no indication that Prop 12 has contributed to elevated pork prices at the national level. I want to insert that for the record. I think there are a lot of other elements that impact market prices, and let's start with tariffs. Mexico is the top valuation destination for U.S. pork. Last year, $2.5 billion. China is the U.S.'s largest market for pork variety meat by a value of $1.1 billion. Canada is the top market for U.S. processed pork and the fourth largest market for U.S. pork markets at $852 million. And of course, so what are we doing with Canada and Mexico? We're in a trade war. We're in a trade war, when in fact, in 2020, President Trump After the conclusion of the U.S.-Mexico trade agreement, I think I remember him saying the best and most beautiful, greatest trade agreement ever known to mankind. Now we are in a trade war with our two biggest trading partners, Mexico and Canada, which accounts for about 40% of our trade, a lot of agricultural trade back and forth. It makes no sense to me. And by the way, that provision of USMCA had a good provision in it. It asked every 5 years for a review period. Guess what? We're in that 5-year period for the review period. Why not take advantage of that best, greatest trade agreement ever known to mankind that was signed by President Trump in 2020? This is a lot about political rhetoric. And I think this trade war goes to the heart of impacting American farmers. I'm a third-generation farmer. And I can tell you in California, we're most fearful about the impacts of our markets that we've established. 44% of our agriculture in California is exported. It's exported. And when we went through this scenario and Trump won, we lost market share that we still have not gained back. So the reality is we are losing markets largely due to uncertainty and inconsistency of this administration's inability to negotiate trade deals. 90 days, 90 countries, maybe here, maybe there. I don't know. But certainly the uncertainty and the confusion in the market space continues to lead to the questionability of the United States as a trading partner. And that impacts American farmers. It impacts California farmers. That's a fact. So it's a simple economic lesson. Less food being produced, less food being exported, more tariffs equals higher food costs. That's the bottom line. And tariffs are a tax on American consumers, American producers, American agricultural producers, and that relates to higher food costs. So I'd be remiss if I did not indicate that when we talk about Prop 12, when we talk about the other initiative, high-path avian flu was largely responsible for the increase in the costs of egg production, and that gets overlooked. I mean, the impact of high-path avian, we've depopulated 170 million layers, 30 million this year, and in California, 17 million. So I yield back the balance of my time, but I think that we're missing the point here.
Gentleman yields back. Now I recognize the Chairman Emeritus of the House Agriculture Committee, Mr. Lucas from Oklahoma.
That's politer than saying fossil, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Mr. Scheidemann, your testimony touches on how Prop 12 could lead to the consolidation of family farms and small businesses. In your opinion, what will it mean for consumers across the U.S. if we begin to lose small and medium-sized producers?
I think, Congressman, thank you for the question. And as we've studied the market worldwide, we've seen, for example, Europe has put in restrictions similar to what we see in California, and we've seen their production decline to the point where they've lost export markets. And so it seems to me to be a fairly certain statement to say that our production will decline as we lose small and medium-sized farmers, making the product less available. We've talked at length here about the increase in the cost of the product at the store. I feel like we're, with the uncertainty that we're looking at it, we're kind of at a little bit of a tipping point. Are we going to continue to have quality, affordable protein, or are we going to go the other way?
Ms. Roca, what will it mean for your member companies if we see a reduction in small and mid-sized producers? Because you're next in the chain as we go towards the consumer.
Yes, thank you so much. Again, I believe we'll see a decrease in choice. Ultimately for us, it's about prices. And so that is, where we keep, looking at prices. So yet another regulation put upon restaurants is also something that, obviously concerns us.
Mr. Hord, I want to talk a little bit about administrative burden. In my home district, in Guyman, Oklahoma, we have a seaboard plant, and they process around 22,000 pigs a day. Under Prop 12, what additional steps will the plant have to take to ensure certain pigs are processed and products are labeled Prop 12 compliant? This is where the road meets the rubber.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Congressman. as being a producer, I know intimately what happens at the producer side. I can speculate a little bit on what happens in the processing side, but we have to segregate the product, or the pigs that have to be segregated, and then we have to schedule the loads accordingly, and then they usually sequence those. From my knowledge, they come into the plant, are segregated at the plant before they go to the harvest, and then as they go through that process, then they're segregated all the way into the freezer, and then have to be segregated as those different products are shipped to California. So yeah, there's an immense amount of coordination and cost as you track all those things through. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely
Okay.
does. And also from the perspective, livestock's different than many other industries in that you have a live animal, and from birth to processing, there are timelines and feed programs and processing. You can't start and stop the factory. You can't start and stop the chain flow, correct? From the farm to the...
That's correct.
Absolutely. Ms. Cook, and I know Austin Scott touched on this, your testimony highlights this, but can you briefly detail the variable cost over time that contribute to higher overall cost? And do we have an estimate of how much this is costing consumers now?
Thank you for the question. When it comes to variable costs, there's a few things to consider. One, if you have fewer pigs in a barn, you're probably paying more to heat that barn, so utilities. Also the skilled management and labor that's required to work under a Prop 12 system. And other things like feed efficiencies and veterinary care are also really important costs that could increase under Prop 12. So studies show that could increase that total costs category up to 15%. And that is certainly reflected in the cost producers need to make that work and then passed on to the consumer as well.
So potentially cause chaos in the supply chain.
Yes.
Exactly. Mr. Chairman, I can't think of an issue more important than to consumers all over the country, and maybe the world for that matter, than this issue. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentlelady from the Buckeye State, Congresswoman Brown, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Craig. I want to start by putting today's hearing in context. The Supreme Court has ruled on this issue. This is settled law. The court was clear. States have rights to establish standards for goods sold within their borders. Proposition 12 wasn't a federal mandate. It was a ballot initiative passed democratically and overwhelmingly by California voters. And other states have followed suit. States across the country have either already passed or have introduced popular and often bipartisan measures that reflect local consumer values on animal welfare, food safety, and consumer transparency. This committee often hears concerns, particularly from my friends on the other side of the aisle, about federal overreach and one-size-fits-all policies that don't work for farmers and businesses on the ground. Yet, here we are doing the opposite, discussing ways to override democratically enacted regulations at the federal level. The reality is that major food and agricultural companies across the country have already moved to comply with Prop 12. They have made investments, integrated new standards into their supply chain, and adapted to a changing market. That tells us that these benchmarks are both possible and marketable. What farmers need right now is certainty, not uncertainty from members of Congress reopening what's already been decided. Mr. Cushman, American Farm Bureau represents millions of farms of all shapes and sizes across the country. In your testimony, you mentioned several concerns about farmers transitioning to comply with Prop 12 standards. However, I'm wondering if you can also speak to some of the challenges farmers who have already transitioned to Prop 12 compliant infrastructure may face if Congress were to overturn the law. What kind of economic impact would those farmers have?
Thank you so much for the thoughtful question. If Prop 12 was overturned, it would not impact those farmers' ability to continue their operations in the way that they see fit. They can continue serving the markets that have a demand or request for Prop 12 compliant meat. What it would do is prohibit states from continuing to enact these kinds of patchwork of ratcheting up their requirements. So it would in that way protect those farmers that have made those investments from other states, changing and having a 25 square foot per sow rule or a 30 square foot per sow rule.
Thank you. And Ms. Lashmet, your testimony also mentions the investment that many farmers have made to be in compliance with, early compliance with Prop 12. Do you have anything to add about what that impact may be on those farmers?
Yeah, while I would agree with Mr. Cushman that none of the bills we've seen would require those farmers to convert back to the systems that they were under pre-Prop 12, that may overlook the cost that they've already spent in making those changes in the first place, right? So they have already made those changes. They've got those sunk costs. And I think that that's a point that they frequently raise, both in lawsuits and otherwise, when they're looking at those costs, that they've already spent them. So even if there's no requirement that they go back in the law, they will have to analyze whether that's something that they want to do and more cost they'd want to incur.
Thank you. And your testimony also notes that the Supreme Court upheld the California law in a complex but ultimately affirming decision. In your view as a legal scholar, what are the implications of Congress intervening to undo a law that has been both democratically enacted by voters and upheld by the highest court in the land? Is there any sort of precedent in recent history for this type of congressional action?
That's something I might have to get back with you with some supplemental testimony for the record.
Okay, thank you. To all of our witnesses, I appreciate you being here today and sharing what you're hearing from producers and stakeholders on the ground when it comes to Proposition 12. Your insights are valuable to this committee. And with that said, I want to be clear. Proposition 12 has been settled by the voters of California and by the U.S. Supreme Court. Meanwhile, this committee has pressing unresolved issues before us. That includes the current administration's action to freeze congressionally appropriated funds, USDA abruptly terminating grant programs, and dismissing career public servants without cause. I look forward to addressing those pressing issues in this committee as well. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now please recognize the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Feenstra, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Craig, for holding this critical hearing. This is a very, very important hearing. So I represent the largest hog producing district in the nation. I represent the largest hog producing state in the nation. And I also represent the largest county in the nation that produces hogs. And that's over 1 million hogs that we have in my individual county. And I'm so proud to have Matt Scheidemann here from our county that knows. All right, we live it, we breathe it, we see it every day. We understand Prop 12. All right, and I want to dig into this a little bit so everybody can just sort of understand what's happening here. All right, first of all, I've got a bunch of letters here from the farms I visited in my district firsthand to talk about this egregious mandate, and I want to bring these stories to light. So, Chairman, if I may ask for unanimous consent for these farmers concerned to be submitted to the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Scheidemann, let's talk about what Prop 12 is all about. It's really about the health of the animal, right? That's how it all started, all right? It's very simple, all right, that we want to protect the animal health. So when I visited family farms in my district, they noted that the system has caused increased stress, injury for the animal, mortality, while limiting individualized animal care, right? And yet Prop 12 is supposed to make sure that doesn't happen. Can you explain what's happening? Why do they have stress and injuries from Prop 12?
I think the part of the root of the problem is just simply the fact that you have an initiative that was crafted by people who have not lived the industry, who have not been around the animals, and you know, those of us who've been around it for generations can tell you, well, this animal is going to do this, and if you give this animal this space, she's going to do this. Right. And that's really, that institutional knowledge, what Prop 12 does is it takes away our ability to act on what we know for the best interest of the animal. And maybe it's been settled in other places, but that has not been settled in Iowa, and we would prefer to have the freedom to manage our animals the best way we can see fit for the best possible outcome.
That's right. Thanks for your expertise on this. You live it and breathe it every single day. And think about this. So I just talked about Iowa being the largest state in the nation for producing hogs. California, on the other hand, makes up less than 0.1% of pork production, 0.1%, and yet they're creating the law. And we make 40%. 40% of the hogs come out of Iowa. And yet we are bound by a state that is 0.1% of the hogs. How egregious is that? How clueless is that when they don't have an idea of what these animals are going through, and when you create larger pens, they destroy each other. That's what hogs do. This is just stupid. So let me go on a little further. So when we have to do Prop 12, all right, what are the ramifications? Does it cost you more money if you have to go down to Prop 12? All right, we sort of went through this already, but it's going to cost you how much more per animal? Do you know?
We've talked about the 3,500 to 4,500 range per sow or more.
Yep, 3,500, right?
Right.
To 45. Cost. So think about that. All right, so now it's going to cost the producer that much more. And then it's noted here that in California, the prices have increased 20 to 40% on average. All right, so prices have increased, the cost for the farmer has increased, and the animal is far worse off by Prop 12. What are we doing? What are we doing? This all happens because California has a liberal progressive agenda that has no idea what farming is all about. Let's be clear. Prop 12 is a direct threat to our viability of family farms, the health and welfare of animals, and the affordability of pork production in America. I stand with my Iowa hog farmers, and I urge this committee to act. Food security is national security, and Prop 12 is putting both at risk. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now please recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Sorensen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our ranking member, Craig. Across Illinois, county fair season's in full swing, igniting a proud tradition. Shout out to Stevenson County Fair and McLean County Fair going on right now. But this isn't just 1 week out of the year. It's not just funnel cakes, corn dogs, and tilt-a-whirls. Farm kids from all over my district, from Freeport and Kewanee, Monmouth, and Canton, have been getting up for weeks and months and years before dawn, raising, prepping their animals in order to show off their skills. It's a great tradition where we can bring families from our big cities to our fairgrounds to understand and appreciate the grit, the pride, the importance of agriculture and animal husbandry. In our part of the world, FFA and 4-H organizations, parents and grandparents have passed down essential values of animal stewardship to young farmers, rooting them in responsibility and compassion and in hard work. Their experience reflects a broader truth. Animal stewardship is not a partisan issue. It is a core tradition of American agriculture, and it is something that we're also proud of. From small family farms to large commercial operations, producers understand that the health and the welfare of their animals are directly tied to the longevity of their business and the confidence of the consumer. The hands-on experience gained in daily care, nutrition, health management reflects the very values that underline innovative agricultural standards. You know, I live just 2 miles from the bridge that goes from Illinois into Mr. Feentra's state of Iowa. Now, no offense to anyone else, Illinois and Iowa, we produce the best pork in the world, sorry. But when I'm at Fairway or Jewel or Hy-Vee, no shopper I talk to balks at the idea of making sure that we have minimum space and welfare requirements for livestock that becomes the protein on their dinner tables. Why? Because they already assume it's the case. On the farm and in this committee, we have many different perspectives on what is best. But what's clear is that many of the practices that Prop 12 promotes, like quality care and daily health checks and ethical housing, have already been implemented by a significant number of producers. And I would challenge people to rectify with that fact that it's exactly what we teach our kids early on the farm. Though Prop 12 is a voluntary approach, the measure reflects the enduring values of stewardship that the FFA and that 4-H have upheld for generations. And I challenge my colleagues on this committee, it shouldn't be different from one political party to the other. Shouldn't policy mirror what's working in practice, not just in theory? Ms. Lashmet, Thank you for explaining in your testimony the different sides of the issue. Are you familiar with any existing or proposed state laws or ballot initiatives that mirror Prop 12 standards or that would implement a standard that is vastly different than Prop 12?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question. So certainly there's a very similar law to Proposition 12 in Massachusetts, which is question 3. It applies to all 3 of the same species as Prop 12. There are also a number of states, 6 of them in fact, have similar laws like Prop 12 for egg production that impose the requirements not only on the producers in the state, but also on eggs that are going to be sold within the state. So those are the similar laws. I'm not familiar with states that have enacted standards that are vastly different than Proposition 12 at this point.
The 10th Amendment to the Constitution doesn't specifically say that the federal government can do anything it wants, but that states and the people come first. In your opinion, do you believe preempting Prop 12 could violate the 10th Amendment?
I think that there's always a really delicate balance whenever Congress acts under the Commerce Clause and it affects states, and so I think that Congress will have to be careful to find a balance between the 10th Amendment and the Commerce Clause.
Thank you. As we continue to debate the merits, the consequences of Prop 12, it's critical that our discussions be grounded in facts and not politics. I wasn't elected to Congress because I was a slick talker. I earned the trust of the people by collecting data, by deciphering science, and explaining the results. So parsing out all of the noise, we can see that this law was written as a return to the long-standing practices that define true animal husbandry. But intentions aren't all we have here. The issue is the broader regional implications for producers, supply chains, consumer prices, interstate commerce, and that's what's still an issue for me. And this isn't checkers, it's playing chess. We must make sure that what we do in this committee strengthens the farmer and strengthens producers. Unwanted consolidation that benefits China or Brazil does a disservice to our farmers and the neighbors and small hometowns that I'm fighting to protect back home. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now, keeping with that Illinois theme, I recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Congresswoman Miller, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panel for being here today to examine the very far-reaching implications of Proposition 12. Illinois is one of the top pork-producing states in the country, and I've heard directly from our producers and organizations like the Illinois Pork Producers Association and the Illinois Farm Bureau about how Proposition 12 places a strain on family farms. The reality is simple. Proposition 12 imposes costly mandates on farmers in states like mine who have no say in California's policymaking. Producers in Illinois are telling me this will force many farmers out of the market altogether, driving further consolidation and vertical integration in an already concentrated industry. And I think it's interesting that my friend from across the aisle acted like he understands animal husbandry, which I guarantee you he does not. But he did acknowledge that producers want their animals to be healthy and live long because it affects their profits. So let them make the best choices for their production instead of having politicians that have no clue about agriculture or animal husbandry promoting these ridiculous policies. Smaller operations simply cannot absorb the financial burden of facility overhauls or navigate a patchwork of inconsistent state laws. That's what we're going to end up with. This is just the beginning. This not only threatens the viability of independent family farms, but increases the cost for consumers. Ultimately, that is what will happen. And I suppose the plan is once we run American medium and small producers out of business, we'll import more pork from other countries that we have no idea how they're actually raising their animals. So, Mr. Scheidemann, can you please speak to how Proposition 12 will accelerate consolidation in the pork industry and what it means for independent family farms?
Well, I think partly to answer that, I refer back to Ms. Roca, her testimony. 2 quotes that I wrote down is that Proposition 12 is a death sentence to small business and overregulation takes food off the plate. Clearly, if we're going to lose our small and medium-sized producers, we're going to lose product to the market. How it's going to support consolidation, one way would be through the cost of construction. Mr. Horde referred to larger operations being able to segment maybe a portion of their production for a Prop 12 type market and do something else with the other ones. Well, smaller producers, as he said, don't have that opportunity. And so it's a similar process to what we went through on our farm. I noted in my testimony that we farrowed until 2018. One of the factors at that time was, with the passing of Prop 12, what does the future look like, and what are we going to have to spend on our facilities to be able to meet that future? And because of the uncertainty, we chose to back away a little bit, at least from that segment of our operation.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Mr. Cushman, now that Prop 12 has been upheld and without a fix from Congress, do you see this setting a precedent for other states to pass similar extraterritorial regulations?
Yes, thank you so much for the question, and that is a large concern of ours. The 2022 Ag Census showed that we'd lost 150,000 farms over 5 years. That's 77 farms a day. Laws like Prop 12 make it very difficult for small and medium-sized farmers to exist. And without a fix from Congress, there'll be nothing for farmers to do from when another state and ratchets up their requirements to make it 25 square feet or 30 square feet.
Also, Mr. Cushman, your testimony today has shown us exactly why Congress needs to provide a fix for Proposition 12. What risk does this pose for national agriculture markets and interstate commerce?
I think this would help ensure interstate commerce continues to be viable throughout the country. The Supreme Court decision from Gorsuch was clear that Congress is the appropriate body right now to act on this in order to ensure those interstate markets continue to flourish, not be balkanized by state intervention into production laws of other states. It would be necessary for Congress to act.
I am just curious, when we import pork, are we imposing the same kind of standards on them?
Yes, so these standards for Prop 12 will apply to Canadian and Mexican pork. The Canadian government has expressed concern with this. In fact, they've raised concerns that with the USMCA, its frustrates federal trade policy. The USMCA adopts part of the WTO requirements, and under that, Canada has suggested that this restricts trade more than necessary and lacks scientific support as required by the USMCA.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Lady yields back. Now pleased to recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Figures, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Craig. And thank you to all of you guys being here and bearing through, sitting through a congressional hearing, which I know is not at the top of your wish list in your career, but it's a worthy issue. Look, look, for this to have started in California, I've heard a lot about it in Alabama. I'm from the southern part of the state, Mobile up to Montgomery and such. Alabama has a lot of pork producers, and they are too concerned about the implications of Prop 12 and their ability to be able to participate in the industry. But I've also heard on the other side of this, and this is truly one of those issues that, I came to Congress. I don't come from a ag exclusive background. My father owned a small cattle ranch for a little while when I was a child, but this is one where we had to dig in and learn about, and they're still digging in and learning about, and so I appreciate having this hearing to inform members of Congress. I will also note that our colleagues on the other side have left, but you would have seen this gentleman over my right shoulder jump across the dais if he had heard them say that they have the best pork in America. My colleague, Mr. Davis from North Carolina. And actually, let me back up. Before I go any further, I have an intern that's in her last week with us, Jalea Latson, who is here with us, who has helped us not only prepare for this, but has been a great attribute to our office throughout her tenure with us. So thank you, Jalea, and we wish you the best in your return to Spelman College. But getting back to task here, this is a tough issue. This is one where the Supreme Court has spoken in favor of one of the core principles that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle stand for in a flagship case of states' rights. But this is that, this is where state rights, one state's rights, run up against the rights of companies that, reside and operate in other states, runs up against their ability to make a living. And, in Alabama, like many other districts, in my district, pork production plays a vital role in the economy, so we understand that. And the state of Alabama was actually part They joined part of the legal efforts and arguments before the Supreme Court. But it's an industry. It generates over $150 million in the state of Alabama and many jobs. And I recognize that consumers, consumers have a right in any state to want higher standards for how their food is produced. Food quality does matter. Animal welfare matters. And there's value in continuing to improve standards for both. But this presents the tough question of, is this the right way to do it? Is it informed? Does it make sense? We know agriculture is not a one-size-fits-all. What's feasible in one part of the country may not be workable in another part of the country. Different landscapes, climates, production systems, economies. That's why we have to be extremely cautious about imposing blanket standards or standards that have the effect of being a blanket standard, even when passed in one specific state. Some decisions should be left to the states, who know their own agricultural realities best. But on the flip side of that coin is some decisions in one state are having drastic impacts on others. But as we continue these discussions, we have to prioritize the producers who are caught in the middle of what is essentially a political game. And it's a game that is impacting real lives, real businesses, real people every single day. And these are complex issues, and they deserve thoughtful discussion, not just in courtrooms. We know what the Supreme Court has said, but the Supreme Court has a way of sort of winking its eye when it says, hey, we know what we said, but we know what needs to be done or what can be done to provide the relief that is sought. And so with that, look, I will ask a couple of questions here, but we'll probably follow up with some more off-the-record stuff. And so who is, we can go down the line, but I know some producers are now actively considering not selling into California. Is that a viable strategy at all in you guys' understanding of the industry?
So let me repeat the question. So what you're saying is it viable that some producers don't sell into California?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Could pork producers legitimately make a make a living Xing out California?
Yeah. So each one of us as individual pork producers have the opportunity to make an individual decision whether we would supply Prop 12 compliant pork. The challenge is with California only producing 0.1% of the nation's pork, and having 13% of the pork consumed in the U.S., it would be really detrimental to us as pork producers to not, and the rest of the pork chain to not supply that. And so in reality it's forcing the rest of the industry to comply, rest of the states to comply in order to raise that product for California.
So I'll take that as a no. It's not a viable, wise, or sustainable decision for pork producers to make that decision. My time's expired. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Finstad, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson. Thank you for holding this hearing today. And Mr. Chairman, I really just want to thank you for your steadfast leadership on this issue. You have been a true champion, and really appreciate working with you on this. I represent a very strong powerhouse ag district in southern Minnesota. Most of my counties have more pigs than people. And the great hog farmers of southern Minnesota are the salt of the earth, folks that have given so much to our communities, to our schools, to our towns, to our, you name it. They are just a critical part of what makes southern Minnesota so great. And so it's an honor to represent all of them. And I've had a lot of conversations with them over the last few years, and they have been very crystal clear, loud and clear, that Congress must fix the Prop 12 piece. And so with that message, I've heard loud and clear from them. They've also been telling me that they're very frustrated with the lies and the myths that are around this whole Prop 12 piece. So on the record, let's just go through some questions here. And but I will just say this, that, Prop 12 mandate, it's based on political science, and it's been pointed out many times. Prop 12 was dreamt up by a bunch of folks that have never stepped foot in a hog barn. They don't understand what a gestation pen looks like. They don't understand the life of a hog farmer in this country. But yet they have dictated the terms on which we all live our life and how we lose money in this proposition. And so, I know the swine industry. You didn't stumble upon the way we take care of our hogs. This has been years and millions of dollars of investments. Blood, sweat, and tears to your farms, multi-generational farms that you have learned through your grandparents and through your parents, and you're teaching your kids and your grandkids on how to always evolve and better take care of those animals. And so we're going to do yes or no questions if that's okay. Mr. Horde and Mr. Scheidemann, do you care about the health and well-being of your pigs?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Do you consult with veterinarians to ensure that your pigs are well cared for?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you ensure daily that your pigs receive adequate nutrition and medications when in time for need?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Is your success as a farmer directly tied to the health and well-being of your pigs?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So thank you. Again, I knew how you would answer it. I trust you. I trust my neighbors in southern Minnesota. And the production decisions that are being made have been years in the making. You all are more efficient now than you've ever been. You are more health conscious of your pigs than you've ever been. You didn't stumble upon these practices. So we've heard today Prop 12 and similar politically motivated mandates pose serious threats to consolidation within the pork industry. This is what I've heard loud and clear from my farmers in southern Minnesota. As was referenced a little bit earlier, I think the number was $3,400 a pig. How many pigs right now does a farmer have to raise to even break even with that proposition? I mean, there is an amount that would be not cost wise to even go down this route. And if you're faced with that decision, consolidation will be the logical conclusion. So I guess it's not even a question. I mean, that is a statement of fact. I've heard it over and over again from my farmers that there is a price point that just pretty much ends that multi-generational farm opportunities. So, Mr. Cook, if we don't stop this patchwork, do you believe pork industry will consolidate further? Or, sorry, Ms. Cook, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so I've read a few press reports about this hearing. I was disappointed because some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle said that, well, we're in listen-only mode. Goodness gracious, we better be in action mode. We better be in action mode, and I am very proud of my colleagues on this side of the aisle and the action that we've taken over the last few years to move Prop 12 into the bipartisan farm bill that we got through the committee last Congress. I'm looking forward to, with the chairman's leadership, to doing it again. My farmer friends would say listen-only mode on this issue is pretty much telling you that you're all hat and no cattle. And I think we have a few folks on this committee and in Congress right now that are all hat and no cattle. And it's time for us to move on this, to create some certainty for the industry, to allow you all to do what you've done best, allow you to pass that farm on to the next generation. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Before I introduce our next member to speak, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record, speaking of how states feel about this, submitting for the record letters from governors from across the country, led by Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, where they express opposition to Proposition 12 and ask Congress to act, as well as submitting for the record a letter from 16 state attorney generals, led by Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird, where they express opposition to Proposition 12 and ask Congress to act. Without objections, those will be entered into the record. Now, please introduce the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Don Davis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and to the ranking member. Mr. Chair, I need to start with a point of order today. If I'm not mistaken, I heard earlier that Illinois somewhere claimed to be the best pork of the world. That's impossible. Mr. Figures knows that is correct, and he knew I was coming. Mr. Chair, we need to strike that from the record because we know that North Carolina has the best barbecue, the pork of all.
Well, if the gentleman will yield, I'm not quite sure about striking from the record, but I'm more than happy to host a bake-off, and myself and the ranking member will be the judges, And you two bring it on. Bring the bacon.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair and Madam Ranking Member. I do want for the record to enter into the record that Kinston, North Carolina, located in eastern North Carolina, is the Guinness Book of World Record holder for selling the most pulled barbecue sandwiches in an 8-hour window, and we broke the record after 5 hours.
Without objection.
I'm very concerned when I think about why in the world are we here on this topic today. I'm very concerned when one state would take an action that would disrupt commerce in another state. California's law requires significant investment for pork producers across the country, whether they sell into the market or not. Many of you may not know, but North Carolina has long-standing regulations limiting the expansion of sow barns and the building of new barns. Prop 12 and measures like it uniquely burden producers in eastern North Carolina. Let's be clear. North Carolina's first congressional district, and to be on the record, I have more than 1.3 million hogs and pigs in my district. Way more than people, and we need a fix, a fix. That's the bottom line. People back home trying to figure out what in the world, what do we come up here and do? They need a fix. We need a long-term solution that does not disadvantage eastern North Carolina producers or others and potentially put some out of business. I work with anyone, to be clear, anyone on this committee, to come up with that fix and a workable solution. But for us to not address this, I believe would be a fatal mistake for our pork producers and my constituents. I have a question, Ms. Cook. Given the regulations on building and expanding sow barns in North Carolina, what unique challenges does that present to producers in eastern North Carolina? Will North Carolina producers be disadvantaged in complying with Prop 12 or a further patchwork compared to other states?
Thank you for the question. And in the event that we see more states adopt these measures or we're facing a patchwork and North Carolina producers need to incur those costs to comply, due to the restrictions that you described, they may have fewer options than other producers in other states. The only option available to them may be to reduce their sow herd, which would reduce their production and their revenues, and that may not be workable for those operations.
When I speak to producers back home, they have a fear of the future of their farms. I mean, there's so much going on right now in the agriculture community. A whole lot's going on. And I think about costs, disasters we're experiencing in North Carolina, concerns I still hear with tariffs, so much that's out there. And all people want to do is go to work, make an honest day's living. And many of the people back home say to me, I just want to turn it over to the kid for a future generation. That's it. That's it. Mrs. McDowell Lashmet and Mr. Horde, I'm going to go ahead and put you in. Can you share briefly your thoughts? What do you see in terms of, in the next few years, for producers if absolutely nothing happens?
If nothing happens and Congress doesn't act, I think the concern for producers is that there could be additional state laws that are passed. And I think it's one thing if there are state laws that mirror the California law. I think it could be another thing if we end up with a patchwork of laws where, as we've discussed, it makes it difficult for producers to be able to comply with multiple versions of
I'm going to give Mr. Hurd my last 10 seconds.
Yes, I agree. And the patchwork of states would be devastating to our pork industry. And I'd like to also let the record show that I would like to be part of the pork tasting. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, I claim the record and I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back, and Mr. Horde's interest is so noted. Now please recognize the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Nunn, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Don Davis, my fellow veteran here, and not only a veteran in the military, but a veteran pork-producing state as well. And while I agree with you, Illinois and North Carolina produce some of the finest pork in the world, no one produces more pork than Iowa. So we'll have you out to the Iowa State Fair, flip some pork chops, and Chairman, Ranking Member, we'll have you both as judges in the case. I think Mr. Horde is going to join us in on that. Great Iowa State Fair starts in 2 weeks, folks. The countdown has begun. With this, I also want to say thank you very much to Mr. Scheitman and Ms. Cook. Ms. Cook is actually from the great state of Iowa. In fact, she's helped raise some of that great pork that has come up, and her incredibly family, her mom and dad, are here with her today too. So we're glad to have an Iowa gal here who not only is an accomplished economist, but she's actually seen firsthand how this operates. And that's one of the reasons we're all here today, right? 49 states all want to be able to deliver their products. But for one state, which is telling all the rest of the union they can't do it. We know this to be true, and this is bad policy out of California. It's not just bad policy, it's an insult to every hardworking farmer in this country who has been doing it right for generations. I know this much to be true. In Iowa, we raise 25 million hogs per year. I know in California, they consume 13% of all pork in this country. So this is not a war against the people of California. This is a clarification of a bad policy that's been taken by a few politicians in Sacramento. Not only is Iowa the top state producing pork, but right now our hog farmers are facing the toughest economy in decades. And the last thing they need is more red tape, not from Washington, D.C., but from the left coast, 2,000 miles away. These regulations aren't just affecting Iowa farmers either. Proposition 12 has had a tangible impact on consumers across the country. And I'll go back to California on this one. They've seen a price increase of more than 20% on most pork products, with loins costing 41% more than ever before, which means they've got to come to the Iowa State Fair as well to be able to get bacon and pork chops actually at a livable wage. The Supreme Court was very clear here. It's up to Congress to help define this space. We all agree interstate commerce is clear. No one state should hold the other 49 hostage, which is exactly why I teamed up with my very good friend, Ashley Hinson, a great representative from Iowa, on Save Our Bacon Act. This is an effort to put the nonsense and federal government back into the driver's seat on interstate commerce and take away the nonsense that's been created by the few. Our bill makes it clear. If you don't grow it, you don't get to regulate it. So, Mr. Scheitman, I'd like to talk with you a little bit here, particularly on the area of workforce safety. What is the most dangerous aspect of Proposition 12 for the producers or workers inside barns every day as a result of this nefarious proposition?
I think if we lose the ability to confine our females at key times, that creates danger for the stockman potentially. As I've talked about a few different times already today, we have developed our systems and housing systems with a three-prong approach in mind, and safety of the stockman being one of those prongs, and welfare of the animal, production of the animal. So truly, one of the dangerous things inside the barn, especially with the breeding herd, is if we don't have control over when and where we can confine our animals a little bit for our safety, for their safety, that adds risk.
We just had Secretary Brooke Rollins come out to Iowa, and she saw one of our hog farms here, and we had 5 veterinarians on status who were there providing great care for the livestock. Nobody takes better livestock care than a farmer, particularly one who it's part of their breed and their herd. You know, when you look at this, is there a biosecurity concern that comes up from states arbitrarily throwing mandates like this down?
Yeah, the concern comes from the inspectors that are potentially brought in. It takes roughly 3 days for pig disease to be free from the human body if you've interacted with it. It's not that it affects the human body, but the human body carries it. And so if the inspection process doesn't honor that 3-day separation, the potential for disease spread is very real.
Ms. Cook, in the time that we have left, not only are you an accomplished economist, as we highlighted here, what does Proposition 12 do to a family farm like yours?
I think when we talk about the uncertainty that the potential of more measures or a conflicting patchwork creates, it really jeopardizes not just future investment decisions, but the ability to pass those farms on for generations.
I would absolutely agree. Let's not only save our bacon, let's save our family farms. And Mr. Chairman, we look forward to seeing you at the State Fair for that pork competition. I yield my time.
Gentleman yields back. Before I introduce our next member, I want to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record comments that Canada provided to the World Trade Organization Technical Barriers to Trade Committee that outlines their concerns with Proposition 12. Also submitting a letter from Canadian, United States, and Mexican government officials where they outline their concerns with Proposition 12 and Question 3. Without objection, those will be entered into the record. And now I'm pleased to recognize Mr. Mesmer from Indiana for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the witnesses for being here today. It seems like some of my Democrat colleagues have picked this issue to finally care about states' rights. Mr. Cushman, does Section 12,007 restrict any state from implementing their own standards of production, or does it simply clarify that states can only implement production standards for livestock producers in their own states?
Thank you for the question. You're correct. It only limits states to regulate products within their own states, production within their own states. It does clarify, though, that states are not permitted to regulate production outside of their own state.
Okay, thank you. I want to call attention to a discrepancy I've seen in the committee room today.
Yep.
For the past couple months, myself and other Republicans on the committee have wrongfully been accused of limiting food access for Americans in need. But some of those members who most adamantly support those false claims now support a regulation that has single-handedly increased pork prices in California by at least 20% and is likely to increase prices nationally if left unchecked. Mr. Cook, your written testimony, or Ms. Cook, your written testimony identifies the consumer prices that California residents have experienced as a result of Prop 12. In the absence of a fix, how will Prop 12 impact consumer prices, and can we expect it will threaten access to affordable, protein-dense pork products nationwide?
Thank you for the question. And a big reason why those prices are higher is because it's much more expensive to get that pork to consumers and to produce it. So in a situation where more states adopt these measures or a patchwork of regulations, more producers are required to undertake more costly production practices. That could then result in those much higher prices for not just California, but any impacted market.
Thank you. Former Ag Secretary Vilsack said during a visit to the Hill last Congress, without congressional action on Prop 12, there will be chaos in the meat marketplace. Mr. Hord, in your written testimony, it identifies a threat of a patchwork of state regulations to the American marketplace. If any state can restrict the sale of products to wage ideological warfare, do you agree that this creates an environment of instability?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Congressman. Definitely is one of my personal biggest concerns of this is the opportunity for other states to pass non-scientific laws that would impact or force me to continue to have to make changes to our facilities in order to produce pork. And so, yep, that's yes.
Thank you. If there was any evidence to the necessity of Prop 12, the marketplace nightmare would at least be for a worthy cause. But, Mr. Hord, you state that Prop 12 advances no public interest, not in animal safety, not human health, and certainly not on-farm innovation. Mr. Hord, would you agree that Prop 12 is just another attack against production agriculture by interest groups that lack an understanding of the industry?
Yes, it's definitely was crafted from a perspective that didn't have input from swine producers or for veterinarians, and so therefore definitely was an unscientific mandate from another state.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hord, and thank all the witnesses who have reiterated the necessity of a congressional fix to Prop 12. I stand prepared to move forward with a solution that keeps our food affordable and your farmers profitable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. It is with a deep apology I recognize the gentleman from California that I should have recognized last time, Mr. Carbajal, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to all the witnesses that are here today. Look, a lot's been said about California pork, but we all know it's the best in the whole country, all right? I know some of my colleagues feel otherwise, but we still make some pretty good pork. Not as much, but we still do. Professor Lashmet, in your testimony, you noted that during the Supreme Court hearing on Prop 12, the state of California highlighted that some farmers had transitioned their operations to be Prop 12 compliant. as proof that these adjustments can successfully be made. Given the court's decision to uphold Prop 12, what can Congress learn from those producers about how we can encourage stronger protection for animals while also making sure farmers and ranchers have the support they need to succeed?
I think this is a great example of there being two voices, right, and folks on both sides of this issue. And I think that it would be useful for Congress to speak to producers who have made those compliance decisions to get their input on whether they were useful for the farm, whether they did help to increase what they believe as animal husbandry standards on the farm or not. I think talking to those producers would be very useful.
Thank you. Professor Lashmet, as noted earlier, the Supreme Court upheld California's Prop 12 authority to establish animal welfare standards for products sold in California, affirming states' rights. From your professional perspective, how critical is it for states to maintain authority to enact such state right protections?
I think certainly under the 10th Amendment, any right not reserved to Congress is reserved to the states. And so animal welfare standards are certainly an example of a type of law that has historically been reserved to the states, and they've made those types of laws. Now, certainly we've got the balance there between the 10th Amendment and the Commerce Clause power that Congress has, and I think that's where it's going to be a complex decision for you all to make, to find a balance between your wanting to act in interstate commerce and still preserving those states' rights under the 10th Amendment.
Thank you. And finally, Professor Lashmet, how can states continue to serve as leaders in addressing complex issues like animal welfare while respecting interstate commerce?
Again, I think that's the balance between that 10th Amendment and the Commerce Clause rights. And I think California, enacted this law that imposes their standards within their own state. And certainly there have been a number of other states, I think 11, that have laws on the books, at least related to egg production, that do impose standards on producers within their own states. The distinction here is California's law also imposes those standards on any product sold within the state, which is broader, whether or not appropriate. I'll leave that to you all, but certainly broader than actions other states have taken.
Great, thank you so much. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. He yields back. Before I introduce our next member, I want to just ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the American Association of Swine Veterinarians where they oppose Proposition 12 due to animal welfare concerns. Without objection, that will be entered into the record. Now, pleased to introduce the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harris, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And while I appreciate my colleague from California talking about the best pork coming from there, I do come from the 8th District of North Carolina, and we all know North Carolina has the best pork. Thank you all on the panel for sharing today your information and your expertise. Let me ask Ms. Cook just one quick question. Looking through an economic lens, do you think that large producers or small producers are more likely to be able to convert to Prop 12 compliance?
Thank you for the question. We've talked a lot about the costs associated with complying with Prop 12 and measures like it, and for many reasons, larger producers are going to be the best position to undertake those costs. They can spread costs out over more units of production. They also have just certain efficiencies that come along with size.
Great, thank you. Mr. Cushman, as we all know, the work of farmers and ranchers is long and grueling, and they're constantly subjected to changing regulations, changing market prices, and weather events. Most producers have long enjoyed the freedom to raise their animals in whatever way is suitable for their individual farming needs. With Prop 12, as we've discussed today, that freedom has been taken away, and similar state mandates seem to threaten it further. Mr. Cushman, how do you expect producers to navigate the patchwork of state laws that will ensue if a fix for Prop 12 is not provided? And will legal advice be yet another thing that producers consider before making production decisions?
Thank you for the excellent question. And to piggyback a little bit off of Ms. Cook's response, the largest players, the ones most able to handle these kinds of requirements, getting legal advice is something that a much larger farm will be able to handle than a smaller, medium-sized farm. With more of these regulations coming out, more conflicting potential regulations, that makes it much, much harder for a smaller, medium-sized farm to survive and become compliant with one of these laws would require significant resources to do so.
Okay. There is a legislative solution to the problem that we've been discussing today. In fact, I heard it mentioned by my colleague, Mr. Nunn, a few moments ago, and I also am a proud co-sponsor of Representative Henson's Save Our Bacon Act, which says that a state can't impose a standard on the production of livestock outside their own borders. Mr. Cushman, again, can you just state clearly for the record, does the Save the Bacon Act trample on states' rights, as some have claimed?
It does not trample on states' rights. They still maintain the right to regulate production within their state. That is something that states have traditionally done. All this does is prevent states from regulating outside of their own borders and putting inspectors onto Iowa farms or North Carolina farms.
Well, I agree with you that the language here really does strike the right balance of giving states free rein to act within their own borders, but ensuring that they don't set mandates for the other 49. As a conservative, I'm typically partial to states' rights arguments, but the Constitution is clear that there are several instances where the federal government must act. And in this situation, as we continue to hear just the damage and the dangers that come with Prop 12, this may very well be that time. So thank you again, panel, all, for being here to share. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Before I introduce our next member for his 5-minute questioning, I do seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the Food Equity Alliance where they oppose Proposition 12 due to consumer affordability issues. I'll just read the first sentence of that. We, the Food Equity Alliance of California, feel a responsibility to reinforce to you that Proposition 12 is exacerbating food insecurity in California. So without objections, so-called letter, such letter will be entered into the record. Now I recognize a gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Taylor, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Craig, for holding this hearing today, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here and for the sacrifices you made to spend some time with us today. One of the main reasons I ran for Congress is to bring economic activity to Appalachia. Small towns are what make up Southern Ohio, and these towns largely rely on our family farms. That's why Prop 12 is so devastating. It pushes small family farms out of business. The bigger operations can afford to comply with the ridiculous regulations, while smaller farms are forced out of the market, and 96% of the farms in my district are family farms. I'm afraid that Prop 12 will only cause more consolidation in the industry. That means fewer of the next generation coming back to the farm. Mr. Scheidemann, can you talk more about how California's Prop 12 and other similar state regulations will cause further consolidation in the ag industry, and what that would mean for our rural areas like mine that are already seeing continued loss of population?
Yeah, we've touched on this before, but just to say again, the cost of retrofitting facilities, you know, we've talked about how these are generational family farms. And so the facilities they have, just like the knowledge, has been built up over generations. And so the cost of taking one facility and turning it into something not really totally different, but still different, is significant. And I've seen myself and I've seen other friends of mine who've just made the decision, you know what, with the uncertainty, we could build something that's going to end up being wrong if something else gets passed. And so we're just going to sit out for a while and see what happens.
And that can lead to them getting out of the farm business completely.
Completely, yep.
Okay, thank you. The 10th Amendment preserves states' rights to adopt their own ill-advised policies of many kinds, and California has certainly taken full advantage of that. But too often, as with Prop 12, California's bad policies seep out into other states to the detriment of the entire nation. When the Supreme Court issued its flawed decision in the Prop 12 case a few years ago, I think it was a clear sign that it'll be up to Congress to resolve this issue. Mr. Cushman, do you see a case similar to this coming to the Supreme Court in the future, or do you think it's solely on Congress to act?
Thank you for the question. The Supreme Court decision was very, very difficult to understand and parse through. I mentioned earlier that legal scholars have called it a paradox, and they've called it a mess to try to understand. Judges have disagreed on what it means. To reiterate, you need at least five justices to win a case. Of the 9, 6 agreed with our legal theory, 5 agreed we'd established the legal theory, but didn't line up quite right. As to this issue on Prop 12, I do not see this proceeding in the courts anymore. There is a challenge to Massachusetts Question 3, which is First Circuit Appellate Court right now. But on this issue, it seems fairly clear that it's up to Congress to act. Justice Gorsuch's opinion made that very clear that Congress does have this authority to preempt state laws that it finds are unwise under the Commerce Clause, and so this would be up to Congress to fix right now.
Okay, thank you. Turning to my fellow Buckeye, where we just kind of know we make the best pork, we don't have to talk about it all the time. In your testimony, you dove into the animal welfare side of Prop 12 discussion, and I'm sure one of the common responses we'll hear from certain groups will be how important Prop 12 is because of the issue of animal welfare. But Mr. Hord, can you just dispel some of the myths surrounding the animal welfare piece? Specifically, can you talk about how Prop 12 is actually worse for animal welfare in many cases?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. We as farmers certainly are concerned about animal welfare, and it's the priority. If we do not take good care of our animals, then that is a detriment to us and our livelihood. So housing, a lot of times, is not determined by a determining factor of animal welfare. There's nutrition, there's animal husbandry, there's different other systems that happen, and so I can't definitively say that animal welfare is the impact of it is any different on our farm because we care for our animals diligently.
Okay. Thanks again to all of you for being here, and Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Moore, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the witnesses being here today. Ms. Rocha? Is that how you say your name, Ms. Rocha? Rocha? Okay, that was Alabama version of Rocha. Question, you know that since Prop 12 was fully implemented on January 1st of 2024, that retail pork prices in California have risen by an average of 20%, with specific cuts, I think, pork loins at 41%. How have these prices impacted the small family-owned and operated Latino businesses that you represent?
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Well, 20% is a very high number, and we have already experienced many other challenges of regulation. So this is yet another regulation on top of those that affects us. So as you can imagine, small businesses such as minority-owned restaurants, we represent about 1,400 members. It absolutely affects us negatively by increasing prices and having to make difficult choices of either not offering pork, because of the prices. It just, all of what we do is, what I'm looking at, what I'm representing is the consumer side of it with regard to the pricing.
Yeah, and I mean, with inflation, you just add another 20% in addition to that, and that's not very beneficial. I quoted Ronald Reagan in here yesterday, said the government's idea on the economy is when it's moving, you tax it. If it keeps moving, you regulate it. When it fails, you subsidize it. And very often, I think our regulations are causing some serious problems, certainly for consumers, and now I think for producers nationally. So, Ms. Cook, since you're the economic expert on the panel, how many Californians, and I'll go back to you too, Ms. Rocha, on this. Is it Rocha, did we say?
Oh, Rocha.
Sorry, I got to get that right.
Okay.
So how many Californians do the two of you think would purchase or continue to purchase the Prop 12 raised price pork, given the chances if they could purchase the less affordable option that was not Prop 12? What do you think, Ms. Cook? Any idea? Do we have any research or any thoughts on that?
I think what the data is showing us, that with these much higher prices, Californians as a whole, what the data is showing is they're willing and able to purchase less pork. So with that choice restricted from them, we're seeing them consume less but still paying and spending more.
I mean, yeah, the families are still struggling, right? So if they have an option, if they can buy something that's 20% cheaper or 41% cheaper in the case of special cuts, I can imagine why they wouldn't buy the less expensive. But what about it, Ms. Rocha? What do you think?
Yeah, I know that our consumers, are diverse, and we appreciate having the choice. So I think that the majority of our restaurant owners would appreciate having the availability to purchase pork at a reasonable and affordable price, so that they can make money in their businesses. But I think for, overall, I do believe that we would appreciate having the choice of purchasing either or whatever type of pork we would like to.
I mean, I agree. In a restaurant business, labor cost and food costs are two of your highest costs. And so if you can help trim that, it helps the business survive the long haul, so to speak. So Anyway, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to yield a full minute and 45 seconds back.
I thank the gentleman yielding back. Now, please to recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Lamalfa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. I guess I'm the only California Republican on this dais here today, so we do have a different perspective of me living that firsthand as a citizen as well as an ag producer there, and my just inherent desire that why would we foist California's problems on the rest of the country? You know, why would we foist LA and San Francisco thinking on the other 49 states, other than those that have already jumped in? So I look at who's driving it, and these are the same foes as a long time. You know, there's American Humane Society, which are good folks at the national level and the American level. Then you have the Humane Society of the United States, which has carefully crafted that name to differentiate themselves from the American Humane Society. And certainly their mission is crafted completely different than it is about taking care of animals individually. They raise hundreds of millions of dollars, and they spend about 1% on the actual humane treatment of animals, unlike the syrupy ads you would see on TV. They're very well heeled, and they do battle in California, I'll have to say, pretty effectively, because one issue I sided with them on was cutting the fins off sharks and just leaving the rest of the shark, which doesn't seem very sportsmanlike to me. If you're going to take game, then you should use all the game and use it respectfully. But then one thing after another, it's been on using hounds for hunting bear and bobcat, which actually is something helpful for hunters to differentiate with which one they should be looking at and which one they should leave. But then we get down to this issue. Humane Society of the United States is well known to be against the use of livestock for people's nutrition. So by every death by 1,000 cuts, I should say, one bit at a time, they're trying to take that away. They're trying to take away hunting rights. They don't want people hunting game on any lands. And so this is what you're up against. So this is by a death by 1,000 cuts by one bit at a time. We had Proposition 2 10 years before Proposition 12, which worked to try and make larger areas for animals. You know, there's an argument for it, right? And the voters passed it. That was 2008, as I recall here. And so 2 years later, and that was in order to have larger cages for hens, as well as more space for veal and others. So, well, 2 years later, they worked to amend that interpretation that other states would now have to do also the same as under Prop 2 with their hens, increasing their cage size, which we ran into that my first term in this committee here. So California was dictating how that would be done. So that's Prop 2 back in 2008. Someone was asking earlier, will they keep doing this? Yeah, California can keep doing it anytime they want, because you saw 10 years later, Prop 12 was passed, and it's not too tough for well-heeled organizations to put these things on the ballot and then convince voters via well-heeled ads running often on TV. I remember the Prop 12 ads are very dramatic. They had pictures of animal abuse going on, which we all are against, and what they were depicting would actually be prosecuted without any of these laws. There was one particularly graphic scene where somebody, I think it was on a dairy, was picking up a cow with a forklift, or an injured or very ill cow, and so that was shown as abusive. And this was the picture they were painting of what livestock raising is like in California. And so the threat is constantly going to be there from organizations like this being able to place for $3 million and a lot of sympathy these issues on the ballot and get them passed in the Bay Area and LA and some of those coastal areas like that. If I showed you the map of how these votes went, especially Prop 12, which took it to an extreme, all the internal counties of California, all the ones that have any kind of significance of agriculture, voted against Prop 12. It's the coastal areas and the elite areas of California that are voting this stuff in. So I guess in my remaining time, I would throw out there, this does drive costs. We heard a bunch of drama earlier about people getting kicked off the program, or people are going to go, there'll be much hunger, much people go hungry you know, when really what the focus was on illegal immigrants receiving benefits and people that should be at work receiving endless benefits as well. So I guess throwing it back to the panel, if you want to comment further later with other questioners, you just see this is affecting the cost of food for everybody, for people using SNAP, for all consumers, and anybody who wants to dwell on that in further conversation, since I burned my 5 minutes, you know, we know what the effect is. It's going to make it harder on everybody to afford food across the country, those on SNAP especially, that we hear so much concern about on the other side that we're supposedly kicking off on this thing. So California can keep passing this stuff. We need to resist it and not foist our bad ideas on the rest of the country. So I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Before I introduce Dr. Baird, I would take the opportunity to seek unanimous consent. There has been some misleading information that you know, Pennsylvania, which is a growing hog-producing state, that there is complete opposition in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, my home state, to basically finding a path forward to overcome Proposition 12. So seek unanimous consent to submit for the record an op-ed by the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau President, Chris Hoffman, where he offers support for Section 12009 of the Farm Food and National Security Act of 2024. Without objection, this letter will be entered into the record. And now I'm pleased to introduce the gentleman from Indiana, Dr. Baird, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the witnesses for being here. You know, I just can't resist, and I hope you'll indulge me, Mr. Chairman. I just can't resist some of the things I've done in my past, but not all things. Anyway, I have a PhD in monogastric nutrition, and everyone in this room is a monogastric, whether you know it or not, but mono, single, gastric stomach. And so I'm going to stand up for the pigs in this situation, because we had we need to recognize how capable they are of adapting to various kinds of environment and production systems. And when I was at Purdue working on a master's degree, we compared gestation systems, and one of those was a pasture system. The next was the monoslope group housing, where you had a slatted floor up front. We used to call them the Cargill unit. And then we had a tethered unit as well, where you tied them up with a neck. And the thing I want to point out here is that we found over time in that research project, and I found that on the farm when I was growing up, you end up culling those animals that aren't well suited to that environment or that building. And a producer actually knows which is best and which produces the most and the most efficient. Absolutely, they know exactly how that works. And so what we found too, as a sideline, I did some work in some of the earliest work in this country. Europe had done it for a long time in artificial insemination in pigs, and that was part of that project. But back to what I wanted to mention, we found in that research that through natural culling, you actually ended up with a suite of animals or a group of animals that was well suited to that environment. Some of them never really adapted to the tethering situation, for example, but there were others that when they went to the farrowing house and came back, they knew where their stall was in that facility and would go back. They tended to be the more timid kinds of individuals, where out in the pasture, you know, they could interact with other individuals, and in the group housing, you had that same kind of concern. So I just couldn't resist sharing that. And the other thing I would share in terms of pigs, the reason that they look for water and they end up being in mud holes, so to speak, but they do not have sweat glands. So the only means they have to cool themselves is evaporative cooling, and that takes water. And if you really knew pigs, they would prefer to have just a comfortable shower than they would to lay in the mud hole. But that's what it is. And so you got to give these animals credit. And I don't think a lot of people recognize how important it is to have the animals perform well, and the efficiency that it takes to be profitable in that situation. So I've probably said enough, Mr. Chairman, but I could share other stories with you, but I can tell you want me to go on. So anyway, I want to ask this question from everyone, because the national pork producers were concerned about Prop 12, and we've been concerned about Prop 12 for a long time. But Prop 12 doesn't inherently improve animal welfare. In fact, the American Veterinary Medical Association, the largest association representing veterinarians, supports the chairman's fix. They do not support Prop 12 because it fails to follow the science, and it limits the flexibility of farmers and vets in order to best serve their animals. So I'd like to ask our producers first, what's your experience with Prop 12 style of housing for sows? Is the injury incidence higher in those situations, and isn't that bad for animals? So I'll start with our two producers, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Congressman. Our experience is that animal welfare is a complex issue of multiple things. As you being a PhD, that's impressive, nutritionist, and you understand there's nutrition, there's animal husbandry, and our experience is that the biggest impact is how we care for them, and how we take care of them is the leading indicator of animal welfare. Thank you.
And you certainly have to recognize that, a producer, how are you going to make any money if you don't take care of the animals,
Right.
And so that's a very important aspect of animal husbandry. So
Yep, for sure.
Good answer. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Baird, for the question and for your research. I don't have a lot to add to what Mr. Hord said or to your experiences, but just the ability to care for your animals. And a big piece of husbandry is understanding the animal and knowing how the animal acts and knowing what that animal is going to do. And so I don't have much to add, but I thank you for your experience.
Anyone else care to comment? So anyway, I guess I'd just say, Mr. Chairman, that I guess I've already gone over my time, haven't I? Anyway, thank you for being here and sharing your expertise with us and for this committee. It helps us make better decisions. Thank you. I yield back.
Well, Dr. Baird, thank you for sharing your experience and your knowledge. Much appreciated, my friend. Before we adjourn, I need to extend my apologies, or the ranking member wouldn't extend her apologies. She was pulled away. She was hoping that it would time up better, but she certainly sends her appreciation to all of our witnesses who took, went through, the time, the cost to travel here and to share your perspectives, and let me add my closing as well. Let's be clear about Prop 12. Prop 12 has hurt small and medium-sized producers. Prop 12 has hurt consumers with increased costs, impacting food affordability. That's something we talk a lot about in a bipartisan way in this committee. Prop 12 has the potential, as we've heard, to actually result in harm for the sows through the compliance that is required. Prop 12 ignores agriculture science. And quite frankly, American agriculture can be defined as science, technology, and innovation. As we've heard today, Prop 12 has hurt our small family-owned restaurants and folks in that supply chain for our restaurants. It's an industry that survives on only, I would say, a range of 3 to 10% profit, closer to 3% most days. And so any mandate of adding costs will hurt those family-owned businesses and jobs and food accessibility for folks that are going looking to those restaurants for their nutrition. So the question I have, some have claimed that Prop 12 is a mandate. Well, what is a mandate? 100%, well, I would say that's probably a mandate. 90%, that's pretty good. That'd be a mandate. 80% mandate. Let's get on. I think 51% would be a mandate. Maybe 50%. Maybe. Well, let's be generous. Say 40% is a mandate. And although the Prop 12 initiative passed in 2018, it was far from a mandate, for the record. Only 20% of Californians voted in that election. And of those 20%, only 13% that voted in California approved this ill-thought provision. 13% of Californians. That is not a mandate. And I think that's why we've seen all the signals, not just from Justice Gorsuch, because I read it from at least two other justices in the Supreme Court who said that this is a responsibility Congress has to fix. This committee will consider a measured correction that preserves states' rights to control their internal agriculture practices, will protect interstate commerce, and preserve states' animal health regulations and laws. And so a huge thank you to our witnesses for coming here and to sharing your perspective and your expertise. I thought this was an outstanding hearing. A thank you to our staff for all of your work to make this a successful hearing, and to the members who, quite frankly, under a lot of pressure today with a lot of things that are going on, and the time constraints that we're under that came out and asked questions today. So under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any question posed by a member. This hearing of the Committee on Agriculture is adjourned.